That afternoon the sky was gloomy. The haunting caw of crows filled the air. Gabimaru was awaiting his final sentence, but even after 10 consecutive strikes from the executioner, he remained completely unharmed. Even the executioner's blade shattered, to the astonishment of everyone present. Gabimaru could not understand why he was unable to perish. He believed he had nothing left to live for. Gabimaru was a ninja born in the village of Iwagakure. Trained in the deadly arts from childhood, many lost their lives during training, but in return the survivors gained superhuman bodies. That was why the executioner from before could not end Gabimaru's life even before he had used ninjutsu. The next day Gabimaru was taken to be put to the flame, an incredibly painful method of dispatch. Sometimes the victim is mercifully ended beforehand, but that spear also shattered against Gabimaru. The fire was lit, and although the pyre burned fiercely, he was completely fine. Only his clothes were burned to ash. He asked the woman outside the prison to get him some clothes, but she was only focused on documenting his profile, not caring that he was unclothed. Truthfully, Gabimaru had no information about his parents. He only heard the village chief ended their lives when he was a child. Since then Gabimaru was raised to become a ninja, living without dreams, only taking lives on his superior's orders. The reason for his capture was that he tried to leave the village, while the chief forbids anyone from leaving, so he was betrayed by his own comrades and captured during a mission. The next day Gabimaru was taken to be torn asunder by bulls. A human leg can withstand about 50 kilograms of force, but a bull has a pulling force of over 950 kilograms. This method not only severs the legs, but also tears the convict apart from the hips to the chest. As soon as the straw on their backs is lit, the bulls will go into a frenzy and run for their lives. However, with a slight flex of his legs, Gabimaru stopped them from running. Finally, both animals collapsed to the ground, foaming at the mouth. It was then that the woman approached Gabimaru and asked, "Though you say you want to be ended, when your end is near you resist it. What was the real reason you tried to leave the village?" Gabimaru coldly uttered 2 words: nothing at all. He was the best in Iwagakure, recognized by the village chief, who allowed him to marry his daughter. Unlike her cruel and ruthless father, she was a carefree, an innocent soul who completely changed Gabimaru's chaotic life. Things like not wearing sandals in the house and having to pray once a day to show gratitude for this life. Gabimaru was confused and grew tired of her. He did not want to lose himself, so he asked the chief for permission to leave. The chief agreed on the condition of one final mission. He actually knew it was a setup, but even if he escaped, the village's people would pursue him. He should never have opposed the village chief in the first place. That evening, someone warned the woman not to get involved with Gabimaru, the monster who took 20 lives before his capture. Meanwhile, Gabimaru was also questioning himself. Why could not he accept his fate? Well, tomorrow would bring an end to it all. This time he was put in a cauldron of oil boiling at over 370 degrees. However, once again he resisted his end. After many failures, they turned to the most reliable method. Sajiri, the woman who had been taking notes these past few days, was not just a sword tester sent from Edo, but also an executioner from the famed Yamada clan. The people of this clan have practiced sword testing and execution for generations, so their legitimacy is beyond question. For the first time in his life, Gabimaru felt the prospect of losing his head. Through that, he knew the woman before him was not ordinary. His hands immediately shattered the shackles. Before he could even realize it, in a flash Sagiri appeared behind Gabimaru. Luckily, his body's evasive instincts reacted in time, but the blade still lightly grazed his neck. Sajiri continued to charge forward, but Gabimaru leaped up to dodge, which left him stunned to realize it seemed he did not want to perish yet. Due to the nature of her work, Sajiri had witnessed the final moments of many people. From that, she learned to confirm people's emotions before their passing. After hearing Gabimaru's story, Sagiri concluded he still lingered on thoughts of his wife. This statement struck a chord deep within Gabimaru. He quickly grabbed a sword and lunged at Sajiri. While blocking the blow, she said, "You cannot perish when sentenced because of your feelings for your wife." Gabimaru angrily screamed that he was a hollow being with no emotions. Only his wife was the one person who said he was not like that. She said he was a kind person because he did not scorn or fear the burn on her face. In the village of Iwagakure, men were warriors while women were machines for childbirth. No one was allowed to live as a human being. Her own father caused the burn on her face to prevent her from living like a normal woman, but doing so did not extinguish the hope in her heart. She saw her husband still looking down in shame. She gave him a surprise kiss, leaving him blushing and flustered, not knowing what to do. A hollow being, how could one react so charmingly? However, while exchanging blows with Sajiri, Gabimaru clenched his teeth, shouting that he was a hollow being, a brutal monster. Even if he tried until his end, he could not be human. He still remembered his wife's frightened expression when he returned after each bloody encounter, or every time she secretly prayed for his safety. That was why Gabimaru wanted to put down his sword, to live a peaceful life with his wife. He thought the chief would understand since it was his daughter, but no, he put the village's interests above all else, sacrificing even his daughter's happiness. In that moment, Gabimaru knew that a monster could forever never find peace. Just then Sajiri took out a special pardon, would not only clear all of Gabimaru's crimes, but he would also receive the shogun's protection. Neither the court nor the ninja village could dare touch him. In return, he would have to go to a paradise. Of course, this paradise is not the afterlife. In fact, it is the opposite of it. It is a fertile land filled with joy, where pain does not exist. Shinsenkyo, since ancient times, people have called it by beautiful names, like fairyland or heaven. Shinsenkyo lies far to the southwest. Those who found it were simply overwhelmed by the scene of hundreds of flowers in bloom, butterflies filling the sky. Just like in the legends, it is rumored that the elixir of life exists in this place, so the shogun sent an expedition team there. However, what returned was just a boat filled with flowers. Along with separated remains of the crew, the shogun continued to send 5 more expedition teams. But when they returned, their bodies had become a source of life for the flowers. After hearing this, Gabimaru thought Sajiri was telling a fairy tale. Actually, everyone thought so until they saw it. The shogun became even more convinced that the place was real and the elixir of life was there, so he decided to go all in. The next expedition would be chosen from the condemned, the most dangerous across the country. Whoever brings back the elixir will be pardoned. This meant that Sajiri came here to find someone with the skills and will to live. On her way here, she heard that Gabimaru's wife is still in the village of Awagakure. Since he was captured, she has lived a secluded life and speaks to no one. She must still be waiting for his return. The only way for Gabimaru to reunite with his wife now is to go to the mysterious island with dangerous criminals and compete with them for the pardon. Before Gabimaru could answer, the magistrate voiced his objection, even threatening to eliminate Sajiri as well if she dared to interfere. However, his tears fell. The game is over. Gabimaru suddenly unleashed his fire ninjutsu, turning himself into a brilliant torch, ending the lives of all the underlings inside the prison. While Sajiri subdued the magistrate, Gabimaru then agreed to search for the elixir of life, but knowing he had to stop by Ito first made him find it incredibly annoying. As soon as he made his decision, his mouth got defiant. Sajiri warned, "If you do not want to go, we cancel the deal," so he quickly said he would obediently cooperate with her. Now, no matter what he had to do, Gabimaru would do it all just to survive and return to his beloved wife. Going back to Sajiri's childhood, her father was once told by a condemned storyteller who requested to be beheaded while telling a story. Of course, he accepted the request. His strike was so fast, the convict did not even know his head had left his neck. A perfect strike, painless and without lingering emotions. Sajiri's goal is to perform that exact strike. As she grew up, her strike was judged as very good for a woman. However, her blade still contained doubt and fear, causing the convict a painful passing. This was pointed out by another of Sajiri's colleagues. She promised to improve next time, but it did not get much better. The truth was clearly reflected through the blade. Sajiri's sword grew heavier and heavier with fear, causing the convicts to suffer. She did not know what to do to remove the doubt and fear in her heart, to be able to reach the peak like her father. Returning to the present, 30 of the most infamous condemned criminals were brought before the 11th shogun. Narayoshi Sagiri checked the profiles of some of them. Murder, arson, all were present. There was even a former policeman. At first they loudly cursed the shogun, but when they heard the announcement to go to Shinsenkyo to retrieve the elixir of life, and that no matter the crime a pardon would be granted, the atmosphere immediately changed. The condemned man who only took the lives of women and children trembled with joy. With this pardon, he could act freely without fear of being captured. Seeing the Sajiri asked herself, "Could I end this evil demon's life without any hesitation?" While the others were elated after hearing the announcement, Gabimaru was bored, yawning endlessly. His striking white hair and small build made the purple-haired woman behind him recognize him as Gabimaru. The hollow, she even expressed disappointment that he looked more ragged and tattered than the rumors said. Sajiri, standing nearby, was still busy thinking about beheading Gabimaru. Looking at him now, he seemed almost harmless, completely different from the terrible rumors about him. Perhaps that was why when Sajiri imagined Gabimaru's passing, She became so frightened she broke into a cold sweat. At that moment, the shogun's subordinate was preparing to explain about Shinsenkyo, but the criminals did not care about such things. So their masks were removed and they witnessed firsthand the only one who returned from the recent expedition. When he returned, his body was covered in growths, which then bloomed the next day, finally becoming a form that was neither human nor plant. About 60 other members are still missing. The shogun's side had no clue what happened on the island, except for this living corpse. After hearing this, the criminals changed their minds and no longer wanted to go. A young boy spoke up and asked, "What if there is no elixir on the island?" Causing the others to clamor in agreement. The high-ranking official replied that participation was voluntary. Anyone who dislikes it can leave. As soon as the words were spoken, the big, tall, dark Yakuza member immediately stood up to rejoin his underlings. But before he could get far, a member of the Yamada clan swiftly took his head. Now they had no other choice. Each convict on the island will be supervised by a Yamada executioner. Just one misstep and they would certainly lose their head. In the case the supervisor perishes, whether by accident or being ended, that person would also be beheaded, and if they do not go with their supervisor, do not even think about returning. The shogun's ship suddenly added another requirement. The number of ships and Yamada clan executioners is limited, so the number of convicts needs to be reduced before reaching the island. Hearing this, the blonde-haired man immediately choked the bowl-cut guy until he was gone. In short, they wanted them to eliminate each other, right? And so the death arena was opened. The bloody slaughter officially began. The convicts rushed to eliminate each other like wild animals. While their hands were still tied, they used all sorts of methods to end lives, from choking to throwing rocks at each other's faces. Everyone fought tooth and nail to secure a spot on the island. The old man Narayoshi watched with wide-eyed excitement because, these days, it is not often you get to see battles like these, while his subordinate, standing next to him, cursed him for being a fool. What is so great about watching convicts take each other down? Narayoshi was particularly interested in those with the red marks, because they have special skills like superpowers. For example, the blonde-haired man who just elbowed another in the face is the leader of a bandit group deep in the mountains. Azuchobe, the purple-haired woman, participated in the raid on Sajiwa Castle last year and defeated all the retainers in the castle. The bearded man fighting three at once is a swordsman with the moniker Dragon Sword and unparalleled in 8 provinces. And the tall muscular man lying sprawled on the ground over there, it is said that no weapon can pierce his skin. But the most special of all is Gabimaru the Hollow. Yet this living legend of the assassin world was standing still in the middle of the melee. Aizen advised Sajiri to get used to this sight, because when they set foot on the island, it will be even more fierce and brutal. At that time, will she be able to end a life? Aizen took this opportunity to remind Sajiri that she is not suited for the job of an executioner. The daughter of a warrior should live peacefully at home and stay away from the harsh fate of an executioner. Actually, if she could, Sajiri would have done so already. From a young age, she had to live in the thick smell of blood. No matter how much she tried to deny it, the Yamada family still earned money from the passing of others. As a member of the Yamada clan, Sajiri was bullied and chased by children her own age. She could only go home and cry in her mother's arms. She had intended to turn a blind eye until she saw the truth reflected in her sword. She was the daughter of an executioner. She could not live a normal life like other girls. At that moment, a few convicts tried to ambush the executioners to escape. They targeted Sajiri because she was a woman. Aizen intended to act, but she stopped him. Though she could not escape this fate, she would not passively accept it, but would herself carve out a new path. Although she was momentarily stopped by fear, Sajiri still rushed forward, taking 3 heads as if cutting bananas, and then afterwards, self-doubt continued to torment her mind. Suddenly, Gabimaru's voice pulled her back to the present. Taking a life is never okay. There are plenty of ways to choose people. Why choose the cruelest one? It is true they are all killers, but not all of them are interested in ending lives. Sajiri only ends the lives of those who must be ended. She is not free to join this bloody game. However, his words only angered the samurai, and they ordered the others to eliminate him to get the pardon. And so one of them immediately picked up a rock and threw it straight at Gabimaru, but he easily dodged it in an instant. Seeing the opponent was determined to end him, he had no choice but to take them down even though he did not want to. Gabimaru slowly walked in front of him, then quick as a flash tore open his throat, causing blood to spray everywhere. He gently handled each one in the most brutal fashion, even biting straight into their necks like wild wolves. Gabimaru ran straight to the sea, performing a mass elimination. In the blazing red sunset, his hands stained with fresh blood dripping into the sea, terrifying everyone. Realizing what the legendary number 1 assassin was like, Sajiri, after witnessing it all, realized one thing. What she needed was not the strength to resist the fear of taking a life, but the determination to bear the weight of the lives that had fallen under her sword. Suddenly, realizing this truth brought tears to Sajiri's eyes. Izan, standing nearby, thought she was frightened by the earlier scene and asserted that this responsibility was too great for her, but instead she sternly said she would eliminate Gabimaru. Finally, after the frenzied slaughter, the surviving condemned are Bandit King Asa Chobe, the Dragon Sword Tamiya, Nurugai of the Sanka people, the Mad Buddhist warrior Hoko, Gabimaru the Hollow, the courtesan Akajinu, the female ninja Yuzuriha, the apostate Rokuroda, and the giant warrior, and 10 condemned under the supervision of 10 executioners of the Yamada clan will set sail out to sea to the hellish island, also known by the name Earthly Paradise, to search for the elixir of life. In the village of Awagakur there is an unwritten rule. The village chief, even if torn apart by swords, shot by arrows, or gravely wounded, he cannot perish. Perhaps the medicine that the chief coincidentally bought from an overseas merchant had made him immortal. Gabimaru told this story to Sajiri, but from her expression, he knew she did not believe that medicine truly existed. Gabimaru insisted the elixir of life is real, he just does not know if it is on this island. To make the search easier, the executioners and the condemned split up and went in different directions. This place is full of fragrant flowers and strange grasses. The chirping of birds echoed everywhere, making Sajiri unable to help but exclaim, anyone who witnesses this beautiful scene firsthand would not find it strange if the elixir of life existed here. Gabimaru immediately objected after hearing this. This place is more terrifying, if anything. Around here are things that look contrary to nature. Looking around, it all seems artificial, and no one knows what will happen next. He requested Sajiri to be on high alert instead of admiring the surroundings. Saying so, he broke the rope binding his hands. However, Sajiri would not allow Gabimaru to do that. He retorted, how can I search for things with my hands tied? Seeing Sajiri was determined to follow the shogun's orders, and even threatening to execute him if he dared break the rules again, Gabimaru persuaded her to let him bend the rules a little, at the same time pointing out the illogical aspect of the food supply only being enough for 3 days. The only clue was also confined to a tiny piece of paper. From the beginning, that shogun did not care whether they found the elixir of life or not. Then what do you know? Sajiri, without many words, swung her sword towards Gabimaru, reminding him that she was the executioner, not his ally. If he fails in the search and is not pardoned, that is not her business. Right now, if you do not wear the bindings, Sajiri would not mind taking his head right here. Gabimaru could only sigh and offer his hands to be tied. Wanting to reunite with his wife soon, the only way was to listen to her. Just then an iron weight smashed straight into his face. The one who launched the attack was the Mad Kyun, one of the 10 condemned sent to this island. He is a warrior monk, extremely obsessed with armor and weapons. Many say that he has taken down and looted hundreds of weapons from various warriors. Gabimaru's neck was dislocated, but he still managed to tattle. Kun is not tied up. Sajiri then asked Kicho where his bindings were, only to be criticized by him for being too rigid. If you keep being so stubborn, you will always be small fry. Kun at this point cut off their conversation. He angrily scolded Gabimaru for daring ignore him, so he took out his collection of tools to take him apart to his heart's content. Weapons are only beautiful when bathed in fresh blood. Kun will show Gabimaru what that beauty is like. He did not understand what this pervert was thinking. Wasting time here with long speeches, he would be outdone by the others. Actually, Kon had already thought it through. There were no clues from the start, so he could just eliminate everyone and then search leisurely. The Yamada executioners are only here to supervise them, so they can freely eliminate each other. Gabimaru was forced into a situation where he had to fight, and what is more, that girl forced him to wear bindings, which was a nuisance. Kun charged furiously, bringing a strike straight down on his head, causing his weapon to shatter into pieces. Kun continuously switched to other items, but it was not much better. Gabimaru was even calmly tying the bindings with his mouth. Kun was furious, swearing to use everything he had to serve him a beating, but he did not have time to play with him. Just one knee to the polearm. Kun's muscular body was immediately thrown back, leaving both Kicho and Sajiri wide-eyed in astonishment. Kun's pile of weapons came crashing down on Gabimaru's head, but not only did he dodge, but he also kicked the polearm back, stabbing straight into him. It seemed like a one-hit kill, but it turned out Kun had carefully pinned a whole suit of armor to his body, so he was still perfectly healthy. He laughed, warning Gabimaru that he was done for. However, he was the one who perished by the very weapons he had looted, while Gabimaru had not even broken a sweat. Achichan Ray. Tuastep tepsip hadach tap cert kaban. Jeek negainanda ding v tu teet si sikafi ye thang nat. Oi lo fan dech tip theo. His hands were also bound. Kicho suddenly drew his sword. It seemed he intended to ambush Gabimaru. Turns out he was taking Kyon's head to go home. Sajiri reminded him to be careful on his way back, because 60 other criminals were still wandering the island. Kicho was surprised she still had time to worry about him, while he just felt lucky to escape this mess early on. Right before the ship docked, the convicts were already planning to take each other out. After landing, some schemed to cooperate for personal gain. None of them follow social norms. They do not care about rules or duties at all. Some even demanded to consume their executioners to survive. For a samurai, the shogun's command is absolute, but now that does not even matter, because the top priority is finding the elixir. Kicho, after talking for a while, even offered to help Sajiri take Gabimaru's head, but before he could even draw his sword from its sheath, he was stopped by him. Right now he just wants to return to his wife, and does not care about anything else. Kicho laughed and told Gabimaru to hurry up. He predicted that in a few hours, the situation would change completely. On the other hand, Aizen had just arrived on the island, having to escort the giant Rokuroda. Noticing something unusual, he drew his sword and charged, but quickly became food for the murderer. Half of the remaining criminals also perished upon reaching the island. Bandit King Azachobe eliminated the Buddhist warrior Hoko. The courtesan Akajinu was taken out by her accompanying executioner, and the apostate Mojomikaza perished from a single kunai. Kicho believed that if this expedition perished, there would be another, because the shogunate has secretly allied with a Wagakur village. Even the executioners are not safe, because Kiko heard that after this event, the next leader of the Yamada would be decided, so ambitious ones might not spare Sajiri. Upon reflection, she found Kicho's words quite true. It has been many days since she first met Gabimaru, yet she still could not understand this man's true nature. Lost in thought, Gabimaru suddenly lunged to attack her, proving that you can't trust anyone, especially murderers with a clean past. His parents wanted to leave the village right after having a child. Moreover, they were veteran ninjas, so they were mercilessly eliminated by the village chief. This was also the first lesson he taught Gabimaru. Emotions will weaken a ninja. If you are not strong enough, you cannot protect yourself, let alone the ones you cherish. Currently, Gabimaru and Sajiri are fighting fiercely. The sound of blades clashing rings out harshly. At all costs, he must find the elixir of life before the village's forces arrive. Therefore, he is forced to eliminate Sajiri because she is in his way. Meanwhile, Sajiri knows she must finish Gabimaru, but somehow at this point she still hesitates. And Gabimaru at this moment has a similar question. He should have been able to eliminate Sajiri instead of just blocking her attacks like this. His wife once said that means he no longer wants to take lives, and advised him to accept and listen to his own feelings. A person with a strong will is one who is true to their own feelings. Thanks to her, Gabimaru began to know how to express emotions, but at the same time he also came to know hatred. That is why he let emotions interfere with his subsequent missions. Even now, Gabimaru has many opportunities to finish Sajiri, but he could not bring himself to do it. At this rate, surviving on the island would be a fantasy, let alone being pardoned. Remembering the chief's words, if you are not strong enough, you can't protect anything, Gabimaru decides to shatter Sajiri's sword, but she resiliently uses her scabbard to fight back. However, at the last moment, she is still subdued under Gabimaru's blade. The emotionless demon within him has awakened. Ending one more life does not matter. Yet at the decisive moment, Gabimaru still could not strike. It was then that Sajiri suddenly remembered something. Every time he took a life, he looked as if he was bearing something terrible. It seemed Gabimaru also struggled with his inner emotions. Just like her, Gabimaru at this moment was crying out of anger at his own weakness. If he stays this soft, how can he meet his wife again? Sajiri gently said that is not weakness but the seed of strength. Daring to face one's own emotions is true strength. As long as Gabimaru knows remorse, dares to face himself and find the right path again, Sajiri is willing to follow him to the end. She wants him to prove to her that a criminal like him can still overcome his ego. To start over once more, Sajiri also has to learn to face her own emotions, to be able to become stronger. Through the battle just now, the two understood each other better and began to place trust in each other. In another development, Dragon Sword Tamiya was stung on the hand by a human-faced butterfly. He immediately cut off the stung hand so the poison would not spread throughout his body. The executioner Fuchi was stunned, but when he saw the severed hand turn black and sprout flowers, he understood the problem. Very quickly a series of bizarre creatures swarmed in. The ground shook violently with the appearance of a long-tongued demon. Gabimaru, on the other side, was also facing an extremely bizarre creature. To ease the tense atmosphere, let us invite viewers to see the past of Dragon Sword Tamiya. After days of wandering without finding a worthy opponent, he agreed to serve under Tatsumi, a boastful man who always bragged about his large mansion. He did it for a living and because of the dragon in his name. Tamiya reluctantly accepted. However, during a drunken session, Tatsumi laughed and said Tamiya's nickname was Dragon Sword, but he could not take down a real dragon, which made him fly into a rage and slash the dragon on the gate, and also the liver of that cowardly dragon, so he was kicked out of the clan and received a final sentence. Tamiya wants the pardon to be free, then continue to hone his swordsmanship and split that mansion in two. Fuchi could not understand his twisted thinking, while Tamiya also did not understand why he brought along scalpels. For dissection, Fuchi explained the Yamada clan are not just executioners but also deal with sword testing and pharmaceuticals. His specialty is post-mortem examination, deciphering human anatomy to advance medical science. Saying that, Fuchi suddenly drew his sword as a warning, making the thought of his end flash before Tamiya's eyes, so he did not ask any more questions and turned to leave. Tamiya's plan is to eliminate the other opponents, then find the elixir. Fuchi quite agreed with that view. As for Gabimaru, at this time his opponent is a creature with a fish head and human body, looking extremely grotesque. It suddenly snapped the prayer beads in its hand, then launched a Gomu no attack towards Gabimaru. But not only did he dodge, he also kicked it in the face. Immediately after, he was grabbed by the leg by the monster and slammed to the ground. Luckily, he still managed to escape. This thing was unlike anything Gabimaru had ever encountered before. According to ninja law, he should not confront it. While hesitating whether to flee alone or with Sajiri, the monster's sharp tail wrapped around him and threw him away. Just one opponent injured Gabimaru so badly, yet giant monsters are swarming around them. Facing their hideous smiles made Sajiri a little scared. Meanwhile, Gabimaru had already entered combat mode. He rushed forward like a flash of lightning, using his fire art to burn the long-haired monster. Next, he took the head of the satanic demon. In Gabimaru's mind now there were only 3 words: eliminate to live, while Sajiri below could only stare blankly. Everything she was witnessing was completely different from the real world. And then, in a moment of carelessness, Sajiri was approached by a monster from behind. Her retreat was also blocked by centipedes. Gabimaru intended to let it eliminate her for him, but immediately after he flashed over, cutting off the monster's arm to rescue her. After it was all over, he suddenly realized what he had just done. The green monster was about to sneak attack, but was cut down by another executioner. It was then that Yuzuriha appeared. She is also a ninja like Gabimaru, so she wants to be close friends with him. Remembering his wife's advice to say thank you when someone helps, Gabimaru bowed his head and thanked them first, then asked Yuzuriha what she wanted from him. Everyone is fighting tooth and nail. There is no reason for her to help him. Yuzuriha swayed in front of Gabimaru, praising him as strong and reliable, so she wants to ask him to protect her from danger. A few cheap seductive tricks of a female ninja did not move him. Gabimaru was not shaken. He gently threw her to the ground to teach her a lesson for trying to seduce a married man. Yuzuriha was a bit embarrassed for being called out, but she really did want to cooperate with him. After all, 5 people are better than 2. Before discussing that, Sajiri wondered why Yuzuriha was escorted by 2 executioners. Actually, Genji was in charge of the apostate Mojomakiza, but he was tricked into his end by Yuzuriha. Genji thought that one person was not enough to supervise her, so he followed along. But Gabimaru and Sajiri understood after hearing this guy had fallen. For Yuzuriha's charm, there is no ninja way here. The person responsible for escorting her from the beginning was a chubby guy named Senta. Quickly cutting him off, she continued to persuade the 2 sides to cooperate. As soon as Sagiri agreed, the ninja girl immediately hugged Gabimaru. resulting in him throwing her to the ground a second time. However, this time Yuzuriha did not lie still and take it. She quickly wrapped her legs around Gabimaru's neck and brought his face close to her, saying, "Even if we find the elixir of life, only one person will be pardoned. So let us just use each other until the very end." After whispering sweet nothings, Yuzuriha let Gabimaru go, not forgetting to act innocent, begging and all sorts of things that made him sick. Yuzuriha stopped teasing and seriously made a deal. Gabimaru lends her his strength. In return, she will provide him with information. The bizarre creatures just now are nothing compared to the bugs here. Human-faced butterflies can poison and cause hallucinations in victims who get too close to them. Yuzuriha learned this through Makiza. After befriending him, she used sweet words to trick him into being a guinea pig. The centipedes look a bit creepy, but they only eat remains, so no need to worry. As for other types of bugs, they won't attack unless you get close. Knowing these things is all thanks to Makiza's efforts. In the end, Yuzuriha just had to feign being gone to make him lower his guard, then eliminated him. Senta continued to add some more useful information. Many items on the monsters have strong religious features. Most are a mix of Buddhism and Taoism. The more we know, the more this island does not seem like paradise at all. Sajiri also discovered the internal structure and muscle groups of the monsters cut by the sword are from a living creature. At this point, Yuzuriha excitedly said, "Cooperating to gather information is the right thing to do," which made Gabimaru wonder why she was trying so hard. The story is Yuzuriha has a sick younger sister. Because she had no money to buy medicine, she embarked on the path of a ninja, then lamented about the training process to become a ninja. However, Gabimaru, just hearing the first sentence, knew this girl was spinning a tall tale. Actually, Yuzuriha has no reason at all. She simply does not want to perish young. Gabimaru still had one more question. "What on earth did you do to that Makira guy?" Yuzuriha narrowed her eyes sinisterly, saying she did not do anything. At the same time, she subtly reminded him, "You should not poke your nose into other people's business if you do not want to die young." Gabimaru then agreed to cooperate, which made her so happy that she rushed to hug him, only to be kicked for the third time by the virtuous man. Sajiri watched them talking animatedly, wondering to herself what she had accomplished since setting foot on the island. While in the final stage of overthinking, she suddenly fainted. In another development, this guy Toma was accepted into the Yamada clan after only 1 month of training. The final trial he had to pass before being promoted was to behead a convict. Toma proposed a place to go to rescue his older brother, as Chobe had been tormented for a whole month waiting for his little brother to come save him, who knew the only way out was to go to this cursed island. Luckily, Chobe was not at all afraid of the strange creatures, but was excited to cut their throats in a flash. Since childhood, Toma has admired his older brother's ability to grasp situations. After the lord their father served committed a crime and was forced to dissolve the clan, their mother passed from a serious illness. Their father was also executed not long after for participating in a revenge plot. The two brothers could only beg on the streets and were attacked by robbers, yet Chobe was able to turn the situation around, turning foes into friends. When he grew up, Chobe became a bandit king, ruthlessly hunted, but still tried to protect his younger brother, believing that Toma would definitely come back to save him, being protected by his older brother from A to Z since childhood. Toma drew a conclusion. The one who adapts best is the strongest. Chobe's a master of adaptation. If he has not grasped the situation, he will run and then regain control of the situation. Just like now, the two of them are running for their lives. However, Toma was caught by a green monster, yet Chobe kept running headfirst. What makes him undefeated is abandoning things that do not change. However, the weak little brother of the past is no more. Toma can now cut off this monster's arm by himself, even holding them back so his brother can escape. Suddenly, Chobe turned back, slicing the monster in half. It turns out just now, this guy was just looting the monster's weapon. While the two brothers were talking, Chobe was stabbed by a monster and blood from the mouth. Moreover, they could speak and surrounded both of them. While Toma was panicking and afraid, Chobe suddenly remembered the day he was sentenced and laughed out loud. He leaped high and split the monster with the prayer beads in two, then cut the one next to it in half and continued a series of monster slashing like cutting bananas. Only fresh blood was seen flowing like a stream. Toma was extremely proud of his outstanding brother. Remembering the old days when he followed the bandit gang, he cried and whined, wanting to go home. Once the son of a samurai, now a robber. Was not it too ridiculous? At that time, Chobe advised his younger brother to just believe in him and not care about anything else. After slaughtering all the monsters, Chobe decided to eliminate all who stood in their way, then find and drink the elixir with his brother. In her delirium, Sajiri, as a child, did not understand why her father always looked at her with eyes full of disappointment. Luckily, at this moment she awoke from the nightmare. She was confused, not knowing where this was or who I am. Genji then explained she was poisoned by the butterflies and fainted, so the group took a rest in a cave, away from the monsters and insects. Although not fully recovered, Sajiri still wanted to go supervise the convict. Stepping outside, she would see Gabimaru busy cooking dinner, sent to sewing clothes while Yuzuriha took on supervision duty. While gathering cooking ingredients, Gabimaru had surveyed the island, but saw nothing resembling the elixir of life. When Yuzuriha asked what he knew about this fruit, he hid his suspicion about the chief's immortality, and said this was the first time he would heard the name, so he was just searching. Based on the drawing, Gabimaru also discovered some flowers, similar to those that grew on the samurai's remains that were brought back to the mainland. From that he deduced the 60 people from the previous expedition all shared the same fate, so most of the flora on the island were once human. Hearing this, Yuzuriha immediately threw the food in the face of Gabimaru. She thought this guy dared to cook human flesh for the group to eat. Gabimaru explained he did not use those plants. Senta now spoke up, telling everyone not to focus too much on the drawing of the tangerine, but to pay attention to the words next to it. The stone statues around the island have features similar to Buddhism and Taoism. The question is, who created them? And are they still living here? Sagiri did not think there was anyone on this island besides them. Both the monsters and insects here are too dangerous for humans. Their ecology and behavior are also very mysterious. They have bones and flesh, but no internal or reproductive organs. Their appearance is even stranger. Moreover, the animal heads that grow on the deformed human bodies. The objects the monsters wear are also religious items. Of low quality, they are scary but at the same time very foolish. Senta believed that they had all been thrown into a morbid and mysterious vortex, where all logic in the world becomes zero while here. Yet Gabimaru laughed with great interest. Creatures that can live without internal organs is the clue to immortality. The elixir of life is on this island. As long as it exists, finding it is just a matter of time. Yuzuriha also joined in the fun with an ominous joke. Maybe the whole group has perished and this island is the afterlife. Senta dismissed that morbid idea and agreed with Gabimaru's point. For now they should start exploiting clues by investigating the monsters, see where they live and how they live. Sunset cast a golden glow over the whole forest. Genji advised Sajiri to take a boat back to the mainland. Let him handle the rest. After all, his convict has already perished. The women of the Yamada house are obligated to marry the next clan head, so the shogun will not punish her for this. Seeing Sajiri disagree because she had not completed her mission, Genji praised her spirit while also calling it unrealistic. Currently, Sajiri is not strong enough to eliminate Gabimaru. Her sword was also looted from the remains of the Mad Kyun. Sword is the heart of a warrior. A broken sword on the battlefield is a common occurrence. Genji acknowledged Sajiri has extraordinary swordsmanship, but as a sword tester and executioner, this island requires practical combat skills, which Sajiri lacks and exceeds the limits of a woman. Just then Senta came over and asked a fatal question. Will returning be easy? When most samurai who come to the island never return. The proof is, over here 2 people are crossing the thick fog to leave this place. Tenza was enthusiastically rowing the boat, yet he was scolded by the kid Nurugai for being a try-hard. He suggested Tenza observe the water's flow, instead of trying to use force and exhausting himself. Tenza's eyes were opened after hearing this, so this is the wisdom of the Sanka tribe. Promised to bring Nurugai back safely and asked the shogun to spare his life because among the convicts he is the most deserving to live. Just then they came across a large ship. They thought it was the shogunate's ship. Who knew this place was just full of wrecked ships scattered across the sea. The surrounding scenery was chilling to the bone. Moreover, strange creatures were also appearing and disappearing behind the fog. Tenza drew his sword ready to fight. Nurugai told him not to, but it was too late, because at this point they were both hit by several tentacles, smashing their boat. After jumping on top, he explained, the animals here are very sensitive to light and hostility. The problem now is the tentacles have surrounded them both. Tenza could only run and slash as he went, while looking for a usable boat here. In this precarious situation, Nurugai suddenly remembered his grandfather's words. He must live to continue the bloodline of the Sanka tribe. It all started when Nurugai accidentally saw some samurai quietly on the mountain. Thinking they were lost, he kindly offered to lead them down the mountain. One of them asked to rest in his village. and he accidentally became the one who led the snakes to his home, causing the entire village to be brutally massacred that very day. On top of that, Nurugai was captured to await his sentence after they extracted all information about the Sanka tribe. In his most desperate moment, Tenza appeared with the determination to rescue the pitiful Nurugai by taking him to this island with him. At this point, they had escaped a short distance when they came across Kicho's flower-covered remains. Tenza wanted to save his comrade, but a tentacle suddenly sliced him in half. Currently, dozens of writhing tentacles have completely surrounded this place. Nurugai looked at Kicho's remains and remembered his grandfather. He lost all spirit and collapsed to the ground. Guilt and self-pity overwhelmed Nurugai, making him no longer want to run or fight. He thought that this was the sentence he had to receive because he had caused the end of his grandfather and everyone in the village. The custom of the Sanka is to live for the mountain for the village. Now only Nurugai is the survivor while everyone else has perished, so he did not want to live anymore. Tenza did not care about those customs but continuously slashed the tentacles to protect Nurugai, no matter what he would bring him back. After the big brother's pep talk, Nurugai understood the issue, so he was thrown a sword with the goal of overcoming the monsters to reach the boat ahead. So after a while of struggling to the point of exhaustion, both of them landed safely. However, all currents here lead back to the island. Unless they find an outward flowing current, there is hope of escaping. While washing the blood off his body, Tenza discovered a shocking truth. Nurugai is not a boy but a real girl. He shyly covered his eyes, unable to look, yet she comfortably showed herself to him without any hesitation. Seeing this guy is also a good boy, Nurugai decided she must marry him when they get back. After bathing, the two decided to go around the island to find an outward flowing current. Returning to Sajiri's group, Genji still maintained his view, telling to return at dawn. Senta half agreed with him, half wanted Sajiri to stay here in case Gabimaru rebelled. That night, Sajiri came to supervise Gabimaru in place of another executioner. He suddenly asked if she was feeling better, which surprised her greatly. It turns out Gabimaru intentionally had everyone stop in the cave to wait for her wounds to heal. Thanks to Sajiri, he had become calmer and more determined. Even if the village of Awagakur came, they just needed to plan a counterattack. Gabimaru wants to live with his wife, so he will no longer run from those who stand in his way, but confront them directly. He also encouraged Sagiri not to be self-conscious. She is truly very strong, she just has not truly realized it yet. Therefore, the next morning, Sajiri flatly refused Genji's request to return. She had to live under everyone's judgmental eyes for being a woman of the Yamada clan. All she wanted was to be seen as a true samurai. She knows she is still weak and inexperienced, but at least she wants to choose her own way of life. Man or woman can both prove their worth when they are given the opportunity and seize it. Hearing this, Genji's face darkened. He drew his sword and scolded. This island is a battlefield, not a place for women and children. But in a flash, Sagiri had taken his sword, following the teaching that weapons can be found on the battlefield. Yesterday, Genji angrily took back his sword, then was suddenly swiped by Rokuroda, losing a chunk of his stomach. Rokuroda was born into a family with loving parents. From a young age, he ate more than other children. Perhaps that is why tremendous strength was latent in him since he was a child. Just throwing a few stones was enough to end his parents' lives. The villagers were also turned into donuts by him and perished. Currently, Genji, because he protected Sajiri, took a full swipe from Rokuroda. His whole body was thrown far away, his back slammed into a tree trunk, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. Sajiri, horrified, ran to check on the situation. Genji used his last bit of breath to tell her to run before it was too late. However, at this time Rokuroda had already closed in on Sajiri. Luckily, Gabimaru appeared in time to kick him far away. His oversized body rolled on the ground, felling many surrounding trees, but he was unharmed and still managed to get up. Sajiri worriedly said, "That is the giant of Bison. He was assigned to accompany Aizen, but now only he is wandering here." Gabimaru stared into Rokuroda's bloodthirsty eyes. Knowing this fight was hard to avoid, so the only way was to end the opponent's life. However, his previous kick was ineffective, proving Rokuroda's body was as tough as a ninja's from Awagakur village. According to the 9th iron rule of ninjas, the village chief taught Gabimaru to always analyze the opponent before attacking, so he needed to test how strong this guy was, then come up with a suitable attack plan. but Rokuroda was as hot-tempered as ice cream. He used one hand to uproot a large tree, then threw it straight at where Gabimaru was standing. Sajiri gritted her teeth and used her body to shield Genji. Gabimaru did not forget to tell her to stay put and not foolishly run to him for support. Rokuroda's physique completely outmatched Gabimaru's, so he had to call Yuzuriha, who was sitting perched on a nearby branch, down to help. At that moment, she treacherously said she was only responsible for gathering information and fighting depended entirely on Gabimaru. It was good enough that she was sitting here cheering for him. Gabimaru was so angry his eye twitched uncontrollably, but he had to quickly put it aside because Rokuroda had arrived. This slap did not look too dangerous. He intended to gather his strength and punch his right hand. However, as that huge hand was about to hit his face, the ninja's instinct told him if he did not dodge he would surely perish. Sure enough, just one slap, Rokuroda had torn up the ground under Gabimaru's feet. Seeing the prey escape narrowly, Rokuroda continuously flailed his limbs to catch him, but failed. Gabimaru was forced to jump backwards. Unexpectedly, that huge body reacted so quickly. His instinct told him if he blocked the blow directly, his flesh would be torn and bones shattered. Therefore, Gabimaru stomped his foot hard on the ground, using the Stone Thunder Kick ninjutsu, kicking a series of rocks at high speed towards Rokuroda. Its power was enough to pierce through a tree trunk. Meanwhile, the giant took all the hits without a single scratch. Gabimaru then used the woundless ninjutsu, making the cloth wrapped around his waist as strong as iron and steel also could not harm him, so continuously activated long-range ninjutsu to attack, but all were ineffective. It was as if Rokuroda's body was invincible. Genji was very weak now. He advised Sagiri not to try in vain anymore and to run, but she ignored him and insisted on stopping his bleeding. Now Genji saw she had the emotions of a normal woman. Sagiri with teary eyes said, "Man or woman, what does it matter at this point?" She just did not want her senior and fellow disciple to pass away right before her eyes. Genji finally understood how Sagiri accepted opposition as a part of herself. He admitted she was the embodiment of the middle way. Therefore Genji gave his sword to her. "If you are determined to stay on this brutal battlefield, take this sword and behead Rokuroda to avenge him and ease in Gabimaru." On the other side was in turmoil, because close combat was not working and long-range attacks were also ineffective. He could hardly approach his opponent and could only evade. If only there was one more person to join the fight, then he could find a blind spot. Lost in thought suddenly, Rokuroda screamed because one of his fingers was cut off. Sagiri was back and more formidable than before, just by understanding the method, the structure of the body and striking through the gaps between muscle bundles, tendons and bones. The Yamada executioners can cut through even the strongest bodies. No matter how dangerous the opponent is, this principle can be applied. While Gabimaru and Sagiri prepared to fight together, Senta demanded to go bandage Genji's wounds, but Yuzuriha knew very well he was not the kind type at all. So she kept Senta back to observe a little longer. It was not too late to run after the other two perished. Gabimaru's plan was to behead Rokuroda, but his neck was too high, so he suggested they split up. Sagiri was in charge of cutting Rokuroda's leg from a blind spot and making him kneel, while Gabimaru took on the role of a counter-attacker to buy time. Taking that opportunity, Sagiri slipped behind and slashed at the joint between his leg, but her blade could not penetrate his thick skin. She reminded herself to stay calm, push all emotions aside and let reason lead the way. Gabimaru signaled to try again, but after blocking Rokuroda's punch this time, his leg suddenly trembled uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Sagiri failed to cut off his hand. She realized cutting through Rokuroda's bones while he was in a rage was very difficult. His movements narrowed the gaps between his bones, leaving no space for her blade to pass through. Normally, beheading is done when the convict bows their head to end Rokuroda with a single blow. He must be forced to bow down, but how to make him bow down is the important thing. While they were discussing tactics, they heard a gurgling sound coming from Rokuroda's stomach. He suddenly burst into tears violently. His screams echoed as if punching the listener's ears. Hunger made Rokuroda lose all reason. He rushed to attack Gabimaru, burying half of him under rocks and soil. Luckily, he still managed to get up. However, blood was flowing like a stream. His mind was clear, but his body could not move. In a critical moment, Sagiri mustered all her courage to stand in front of Gabimaru. She calmed herself, then lightly flicked her sword, making Rokuroda's fist unable to do anything to her. Sagiri turned emotion into strength, using reason to track her target. She did not choose one or the other, but she chose both and harmonized them. Yuzuriha seeing this had to exclaim that is something else. Senta explained, the ranks of the Yamada clan are not just determined by pure skill, but are also assigned according to suitability to lead the clan. Because Sajiri is a woman, she is only ranked 12th, while her sword skills are even better than the current number 1. Sure enough, at this moment, Sajiri was continuously demonstrating her abilities. She used her sword to deflect all the powerful punches of the giant. Finally, she even made him exhausted and fall to the ground with a thud. Sajiri immediately seized this opportunity, flashing behind Rokurota's neck, but he quickly leaped back to dodge the blow. However, the time she bought saved Gabimaru enough for him to think of a new plan. As soon as he activated his fire art on himself, Yuzuriha smelled danger and told Senta to get out of there. Gabimaru performed the Stone Thunder Kick fire art ninjutsu, then kicked them towards Rokurota. He immediately swung his hand and knocked them in different directions. Gabimaru continued to use fire release to attack Rokurota. Although he could not burn him, he forced him to cry out in anger. Of course, Gabimaru's purpose was not that. He tried until he coughed up blood to burn down this entire forest. Yuzuriha, while running, explained to Senta they intentionally burned the fresh tree branches, making Rokurota angry, crying loudly, leading to shortness of breath and inhaling a lot of smoke. Then he would be poisoned by carbon monoxide. This method forces Rokurota to bow down to avoid the poisonous gas from entering his lungs. This posture is perfect for Sajiri to deliver the strike she is most proficient at. Rokurota intended to attack her, but Gabimaru stopped him and pinned his hand down for her to easily do her job. Sajiri's mind was as calm as water, gently striking down once. Rokurota's childhood flashed before his eyes. Always hungry, always feeling lonely because no one played with him. But in this moment, Rokurota felt so warm being comforted by Sajiri. Even though he had done many evil things, she still wished him peace. The fire burned bigger and bigger. Sajiri had to flee with Gabimaru, leaving Genji behind in this place. Old memories came back, making her unable to hold back her tears. If she does not want anyone else to perish, she can only try to become stronger. The fire had attracted the monsters on the island to gather there. While creatures in nature usually avoid this, Gabimaru thought he should go in the direction they just came from. The ecosystem of the monsters is the only clue to the elixir of life, so even if he does not want to, he must track them to the end to be reunited with his wife soon. Sajiri also had to put aside her concern for the other executioners for now and focus on finding the elixir with her comrades as quickly as possible. After a while of running for their lives from the fire, the two came across Yuzuriha and Senta standing right in front. Under the thick fog was a small village. If this is really Shinsenkyo, then the legendary hermits once lived here. In another development, the two brothers Chobe and Toma had just finished farming a wave of monsters. Chobe drank their blood instead of water, then asked what the hermits his little brother mentioned were. Toma explained they are an immortal species. Most of them look like old men and use mysterious spells. Chobe did not care about those silly stories. If they were real, he would eliminate them all and then go find the elixir. While talking, they heard a strange noise. Chobe immediately went to check the situation and discovered two strange, unclothed girls frantically tongue-kissing each other. Their flawless beauty made Toma stare wide-eyed. However, he was a little curious how they could so casually make out in the middle of the jungle like this. The blonde girl was both surprised and angry that humans could come this far, while the pink-haired girl next to her was interested in the two brothers Chobe, so she invited them up to play some games with her. The blonde scolded the girl not to be so crude, then both her body and voice gradually transformed into a tall, muscular guy. On Gabimaru's side, at this point, he was no longer surprised to see strange things here. The important thing is whether the hermits are friends or foes. Suddenly, Gabimaru discovered someone was following him from behind. He immediately chased after and quickly caught the pink-haired child, not knowing if she was from the mainland or a resident here. Before he could recover from the shock, he was attacked by a tall tree swinging a stick. At this time, the other three had caught up. Yuzuriha, seeing this, asked if this was a bonsai creature or something, while everyone was still curious about the tree. The little girl ran away. Gabimaru immediately gave chase, thinking she knew something about this island, then did a flip to lightly dodge the tree's attack and kicked it straight at the other three for them to handle. Sajiri quickly followed him, leaving Yuzuriha and Senta to face the log. Yuzuriha suddenly took off Senta's glasses, not wanting him to see her skills yet. saying that she drank something that made her body secrete mucus. Taking this opportunity, she had to test if her new ninjutsu worked on monsters. Gabimaru was now closely following the little girl. She may look small, but she runs quite fast and even threw our protagonist for a loop. Gabimaru was so surprised his eyes widened, not expecting a small child with such slender hands could do this. By now Sajiri had caught up. She spoke up saying she meant no harm and just wanted to ask the girl a few questions. Unexpectedly, the girl actually stopped when she heard that Sajiri thought she had successfully reasoned with her, knew the girl was waiting for her to get closer to throw a punch. Luckily, Gabimaru appeared in time to block the blow for her. The tremendous force not only pushed him back, but also made a seasoned ninja like him cough up blood. It was not like the overwhelming power of Rokuroda, but seemed to be just a bit of the girl's pure strength. Gabimaru did not know if this was a human or not, but at least seeing the girl like that made him want to resolve things gently. The problem is his wife was waiting at home. He needed to complete his mission as soon as possible, so he had to use strong measures, specifically using the vines in the forest to tie the girl up and hang her high. Seeing Gabimaru's scary face and threat, the pink-haired girl was so scared she burst into tears until she was released and still would not stop crying. Sajiri had to hold her and comfort her until the girl stopped screaming. This was enough to see she was just a normal child. When they returned to Yuzuriha and Senta, Woody had also been dealt with. Gabimaru was eager to extract information from the girl. However, she had not stopped crying, so he could not ask anything. Suddenly, the wooden man trembled and got up, telling them to return the girl to him. In return, he would take everyone back to the village. The first time seeing a creature on the island that could speak left the group quite stunned. Only Yuzuriha calmly refused the wooden man's offer. This guy tried to lure them with food, but it did not work until he uttered the two words bathtub. Yuzuriha immediately followed him eagerly. Sajiri did not know if this was the right or wrong move, while Gabimaru did not care who the opponent was. As long as it provided information about the elixir of life for him, it was fine. In case it tried to pull a fast one, he had more than enough power to make it log out in a heartbeat. The group followed the wooden man for a while and reached a deserted village. The thick fog looked incredibly eerie. The wooden man explained that 1,000 years ago, it did not look like this, then took them all to his house to rest. The decorations in the house were very old. Gabimaru suspected this guy was lying to buy time and did not actually live here. The wooden man insisted he was very trustworthy, so he temporarily believed him and prepared a list of questions waiting for answers. However, Yuzuriha wanted to bathe first, then ask whatever. Gabimaru said there was no time for this. But in the end, Yuzuriha still soaked in the bathtub. He angrily scolded Senta for not being strict with her. The problem is this guy is an executioner, but has no say at all. Yuzuriha advised Gabimaru not to overwork himself. Instead of nagging like an old man, come in and bathe with her. Sajiri also went to bathe with Yuzuriha, saying she was supervising her in Senta's place, but as soon as she set foot in the bathtub, she could not resist its charm. Suddenly, the pink-haired girl poked Sajiri's shoulder, placed a towel on her, then ran out. While they were comfortably bathing, Senta wanted to drink water, but Gabimaru did not let him for fear of it being unsafe. Just then, the wooden man brought in a tray of fresh, delicious fruit, making Senta drool all over the place. Gabimaru saw this guy was desperate, so he told Senta to go ahead and eat, then asked about the relationship between the wooden man and the pink-haired girl. But this was a secret the wooden man could not reveal. Gabimaru had to ask him to tell him about the island and the location of the elixir of life. Unfortunately, as soon as the words were out, Yuzuriha ran in and interrupted. A moment later, the whole group was eating heartily. Only Sajiri and Gabimaru ate nothing. The wooden man recounted that this place is the divine paradise, where the gods live, and the elixir of life that they are looking for is called Tan, the source of eternal life. The island is divided into 3 areas. The coast and forest are Azu. The village they are in is in an area called Hojo, and Tan is in Horai, the central location of the island. Senta jumped up with joy for gathering useful information. Gabimaru's chest also pounded knowing the elixir of life existed. This meant he could return to his wife. However, Gabimaru still needed concrete proof of its existence. The wooden man said sooner or later he would meet the great celestial beings. Then he would have to believe even if he did not want to. Of course, the 2 that Chobe and Toma encountered were also the ones the wooden man mentioned. Although he was cut in half by Chobe, the golden-headed guy's body could still regenerate as before. Even when Chobe brought his axe down, he just gently blocked it with one hand, shattering the weapon into 100 pieces. They could defeat the Ryujin. The great celestial beings are on another level. The tree man welcomed them so warmly. because this is the furthest they can go. All those who come to the island share the same fate, which is their end. As strong as the brothers, Chobe were beaten to a pulp like that to understand the problem. Gabimaru and Yuzuriha, hearing this, both pointed their weapons at the wooden man, but he slowly said he was telling the truth. The great celestial beings and all who invade the island, because they are the most important beings on the island. They command the Ryujin and punish the guilty, specifically those who come to the island with evil intentions. After being beaten with many bones, was thrown into a pit, surrounded by remains of those from the previous expedition. All had turned into beautiful, brilliant flowers, but with a deadly smell. Seeing his brother was about to share the same fate, immediately ran to pull the plants clinging to his brother away. The reincarnations into flowers of the island become the source of tan. The wooden man proved it was not a legend by breaking his own arm, then regenerating it like new. Not to mention he has lived for thousands of years. Gabimaru wondered if the pink-haired girl was like him, but was immediately scolded by Sajiri and Yuzuriha not to point a sword at someone's face. Else, the wooden man asserted one last time that this is the divine paradise. The fate of those who enter here is decided by the gods. Decided, and the chance of leaving this island is almost zero. A moment later, Sajiri followed Gabimaru to wash his wounds. Even though she almost fell asleep before, after getting more information, he narrowed it down to 2 points. The elixir of life is in Horai, and is protected by the great celestial beings. Sajiri was still a bit skeptical about the wooden man. Hoko and the girl Mei were born and raised on this island for centuries. Lines 4. Voici la sudela traduction du futur sart and respectant tots les conseils precedentes. All they want is to continue living quietly, not caring about gods or elixirs at all. She does not completely deny what Hoko said, but she can't yet accept the truth about the great celestial beings. According to Senta, the great celestial beings are high-level hermits. Horai, or something similar, are also terms from foreign Taoism. Gabimaru advised her to focus on finding the elixir and deal with other matters later, saying that he stepped into the bathroom and saw Mei was already there. The little girl burst into tears as soon as she saw his face. But not only did Gabimaru not care, he also calmly took off his shirt in front of the girl. In his village, everyone bathes together, so what is the big deal? Two girls stared blankly at the crisscrossing scars on Gabimaru's back. Sajiri also noticed on Mei's tiny body there was a very large scar. Looking closer, her hair and skin were not as soft as her age would suggest. There was soap in the bathroom, but no sign of it being used. Sajiri suspected Mei had no parents to teach her how to use it properly. On the other side, there was also a young man who had never had a proper bath, so she immediately renovated the bathroom, separating the spaces for men and women, then taught Mei how to wash her hair and bathe properly. Just like a textbook, Gabimaru, while bathing, suddenly thought of his wife. Actually, he does not like bathing because he feels his fighting instincts are washed away with the water. As a result, his wife poured a basin of water on his head. She called herself the strategist and her husband the general. He had to follow her advice to rest at the right time. In return, Gabimaru also had some commands for the strategist. He did not want his wife to hide the scar under her hair anymore. She was deeply moved after hearing that. Actually, she liked to style her hair like that anyway, but having her husband's support made her even happier. So now, Gabimaru also advised Mei not to be ashamed of the scar on her body, because he knew a woman with a large scar, but no one in the world was more beautiful than her. Hearing this, Mei ran to grab his sleeve. The little girl was no longer afraid of him as before. Meanwhile, Sajiri also gradually changed her view of Gabimaru. Perhaps he is not entirely a bad person and is gradually changing little by little. However, the moment of rest and relaxation passed. Gabimaru returned to the harsh reality. He suddenly remembered his top priority was to rescue his wife. Instead of wasting time here chatting idle, returning to Tenza's past, he was once a street youth, despised and looked down upon by others. For being born and raised in a slum, his parents could not afford to raise him, so Tenza ran away from home. Except for taking lives, he did everything to earn money. He grew up living a homeless life. One day, Tenza accidentally bumped into some samurai on the street. They intended to gang up on him, but unexpectedly, he beat them so badly they could not get up. As he was about to smash this guy's face, a Yamada executioner appeared pointing a sword at Tenza and told him to stop. Returning to the present, Tenza and Nurugai are wandering on the beach looking for a reverse current, but it is feared the scorching sun is about to burn them both. Tenza got annoyed at the pessimism of the girl next to him. This was the best idea a blockhead like him could think of. The forest is full of dangerous bugs and monsters, so he did not want to lead Nurugai in there. This made the girl like him even more. She must marry this good boy? Tenza gave up on her persistence. The marriage can wait until they survive and leave here. For now they must avoid combat as much as possible to ensure safety. But man proposes, God disposes. They unluckily ran into a girl from the sky, landing on the sea surface. This person also has the ability to change gender flexibly, meaning this is one of the great celestial beings. Seeing this, Tenza shouted, "This thing is a monster," and ran into the forest. But the orange-haired one in a flash cut them both off. With just one blast from his hand, Tenza was knocked into a tree trunk. Nurugai panicked and was about to run to her future husband, but the orange-haired one blocked her, asking if she minded unusual things. Personally, he extremely disliked this, saying that he was about to launch an attack. However, Nurugai's reflexes were faster than that. Even the next attack could not touch a single hair on her head. Nurugai even took this opportunity to jump back towards Tenza, who was passed out on the ground. The orange-haired one praised her movement speed as quite good for a human, then slowly approached them. Right at this moment, Tenza swung his sword horizontally at the orange-haired one's face, yet he healed the wound instantly. Witnessing this scene left him stunned, reminding Nurugai absolutely not to join the fight. Although Tenza is not very smart, he is proud of the speed of his blade. Only a few magical sword strokes were unleashed. In a flash, the orange-haired one's body parts were severed. Tenza and Nurugai seized this opportunity to run deep into the forest. They thought they had escaped this time. Who knew the guy had just reconnected his body parts and was right next to them. Tenza scolded him for ruining his clothes. As soon as he stood blocking the two of them, a sword flew by, severing his head as fast as the wind. Tenza turned his head and saw his master and cheered. As a result, he was told to run as fast as possible. He proudly introduced his master as Shion, while Nurugai was surprised to find this person was blind, but still ran like the wind. Tenza then explained, his master can see by sensing smell and sound. After running for their lives, the three stopped to rest. Tenza was out of breath, but still tried to tell Nurugai that with his master here there was nothing to worry about. While bragging about his master, he was knocked on the head by him, then pointed out many mistakes of the foolish student. Tenza relies too much on speed, while his movements are very careless. Facing such an opponent, you must aim for the head or legs first. Every strike must be certain. Each reminder was a knock on Tenza's head, making him embarrassed. Even so, he was still relieved to have his master here. Shion was also very happy that his disciple was okay. He thought the last time he saw this kid was on the ship. It was then that Tenza realized his master was alone without a convict. Shion explained he had completed his duty and was preparing to go home. However, he could not find a single current leading away from the island. But after much searching, he finally found the only way out. However, Shion heard a noise and detected a presence he'd never encountered before. That was also an obstacle for a blind person like Shion, so he came back to look for others to team up and return together. Tenza immediately asked to go with him, but before that, Shion made him explain why he was protecting a criminal. An executioner has the right to execute when a convict violates the rules, or in unexpected situations. Shion had also done that when the female convict with him suddenly tried to seduce him, so he executed her as gently as possible. The master was so quick and efficient, while the student was enthusiastically helping a convict. If Tenza gave a satisfactory reason, Shion would reconsider. Tenza said Nurugai committed no crime. However, Shion had memorized most of the contents of the condemned list and knew their circumstances, but the era they live in defines what a crime is. The Yamada clan is just the sword of the era. They do not have the right to choose who it cuts. Above all, violating the rules is understood as an act of treason by the Yamada clan. One person's impulsive action can threaten the safety of the rest. Tenza immediately refuted, saying it was the master himself who taught him how to use a sword. Shion had taken a homeless person like Tenza because he sensed the resourcefulness and potential within this kid. Tenza asserted the same thing happened to him. Nurugai's crime is not deserving of paying with her life. She has a lot of potential to grow if she is free. Shion was quite surprised by his disciple's sudden maturity. Tenza said it was all thanks to his master's guidance. Moreover, he knew his master was a good person and understood his words from a kid who did not care about helping others. Now he is determined to protect a convict. Shion temporarily let it go, but if she threatens the Yamada clan or Tenza, then do not even think about it. The two were shocked when the master realized Nurugai was a girl. Shion then stroked his chin and said he also has eyes. And now Shion and Nurugai officially greeted each other. Tenza was excited to go to the reverse current, but was reminded by his master not to run his mouth. The biggest threat they all have to face is the monster with orange hair, so they must have a proper strategy when facing it. Sure enough, speak of the devil and he shall appear. Luckily, Shion reacted quickly and carried both kids away, but his throat was also injured and bleeding. While the orange-haired one's intention was to take his head, Tenza furiously charged forward with a flurry of slashes. However, the orange-haired one was used to this speed, so he easily dodged. The difficult situation forced Tenza to use the single sword style. The swinging speed was so fast that ordinary people could not see it, yet the orange-haired one not only dodged but also got close to him. A light flick punched 4 holes in Tenza's body. Remembering the old days, Tenza once asked why his master helped someone like him. It is true Shion found Tenza quite rude, but he had potential inside. Every time he practiced the sword, Tenza let his inner emotions overwhelm his reason. Perhaps because he himself did not want to become a samurai, Shion did not force his disciple to follow the rules of a samurai from the beginning, but one day Tenza would find something he wanted to protect. At that time, his sword skills would surely be useful to him. However, Tenza had only received contempt from outsiders. Since birth, he had neither status nor money. He had no potential or anything. Seeing Tenza wanted to give up sword practice, Shion made a condition. As long as he could land 1 blow on him, he would accept. But Tenza did not have time for that nonsense, so he sneaked away the next morning. Unfortunately, he ran into Aizen. He took him to visit the grave of Shion's younger brother. Teshin was also undisciplined like Tenza. He had talent but lacked motivation. While Shion focused on improving his skills, Teshin wanted to live his own way and leave the dojo. Until one day, Shion had to execute a convict, but the person under his blade was Teshin himself. Although he hesitated for a moment, but then, Shion still had to end his brother's life as an executioner. Teshin's last words were, "I am sorry, master." From then on, Shion became passionate about teaching and helping people. After the conversation with Aizen, Tenza immediately returned to the dojo to challenge his master. This was the first time he was so serious about training. Time and time again he failed. Tenza refused to give up and rushed in. Shion was the first person to believe in his potential, while he himself had no faith in himself. At this point, Tenza was very weak. He had lost too much blood, making his fingertips turn cold. His vision blurred, his chest burned as if it would explode. He felt his end was nearer than ever. But his master and Narugai over there needed his protection, so Tenza gathered all his remaining strength and rushed to fight the great celestial being in front of him. Even if he had to perish here, Tenza had to buy time for them to escape. However, after a series of punches, the orange-haired one still had enough strength to tear Tenza's throat. Shion had finished stopping the bleeding. He drew his sword and rushed to rescue his disciple. Tenza struggled to get up and told his master to run. Fortunately, his throat was so sore he could not speak. Tenza screamed in despair. It seemed there was telepathy between the master and disciple. Shion, who was charging forward, suddenly stopped, then reluctantly picked up Narugai and ran. That is all Tenza was waiting for. He spun around, punching the monster without missing a single shot. Actually, he had dreamed of a future in a small hut with 2 golden hearts with Narugai. However, a dream is just a dream. Shion only stopped after running far from danger. Narugai cried pitifully, asking why he abandoned Tenza. Was not he your disciple? Ironically, that was the very reason Shion did it. Tenza had sacrificed his life to buy time for them to run. He could not waste the opportunity that he bought with his life. Although he could not do anything now, Shion swore to make them pay. He still remembered the joyful look of Tenza when he hit him that day. The kid could have left but chose to stay. Returning to Gabimaru's group, Senta, after searching around the village, found nothing useful and became even more confused because there were too many mysteries to be solved. Senta's head felt like it would explode from taking in too much information at once. Therefore, during his night watch, he fell asleep like a log. Gabimaru took this opportunity to look for more clues. He had no more time to hesitate. The thick fog made it impossible for him to see, but if what the wooden man said was true, then continuing south would lead to Horai. Sure enough, after leaving the forest, Gabimaru reached an open field. There were scary whispers hidden in the fog. Looking closely, he saw withered tree trunks, chanting with their hands clasped. They looked almost like Hoko, but did not react when he approached, so he guessed they could not move. Senta had warned that acting alone was very dangerous, but Gabimaru could not return without the elixir of life. Moving forward was his only choice now. Gabimaru rushed forward, unaware that Mei was hiding behind a tree. Unexpectedly, he actually reached the gate in Horai, the residence of gods and hermits. Gabimaru looked up at the supergiant gate. as if made by humans. If this is Horai, the elixir of life must be inside. As he was about to open the gate and step in, the orange-haired one suddenly appeared behind Gabimaru. He widened his eyes, assessing the person in front of him. Both similar and different. To humans, it is unclear what kind of being he is. The orange-haired one sat down, dejectedly sighing. "Why does it always have to be me?" Then told Gabimaru to get lost and leave. She had just fought with Shien's group, so she was not in the mood to fight, even though her mission was to capture all humans wandering on the island. Gabimaru, hearing this, immediately guessed that they could turn humans into the elixir of life. After saying this, the two silently looked at each other, then rushed to fight. While the orange-haired one was surprised, looking at her broken dangling arm, Gabimaru had already added a kick to her head, spinning it 360 degrees. The orange-haired one quickly recovered and leaped at him, but could not catch him. Gabimaru saw the opponent was not ordinary, and continued to charge and attack, not giving her time to react and change clothes. After spinning and delivering 3 consecutive kicks to the orange-haired one's head, he activated the fire art ninjutsu to burn her. But even though she was burned black, the orange-haired one still had enough strength to punch Gabimaru into the wall, then changed to male form, preparing to take his remains to make elixir. But Gabimaru was still alive and well after his attack, making him doubt his own existence, whether this was a human or. The two sides once again fought hand to hand, very intensely. The orange-haired one blasted Gabimaru away with a palm strike, but his arm was also lost after that blow. Although the orange-haired one complained Gabimaru was too stubborn, this was also the first time he had met someone so strong in several hundred years. Gabimaru only cared about the location of the elixir of life. Seeing the orange-haired one did not answer, he rushed to attack again. Just as he realized physical attacks were useless, the orange-haired one suddenly released a powerful blast of energy. Gabimaru dodged one blow, but if this continued, he would be pushed into an extremely disadvantageous position. Gabimaru tried to buy time to analyze and plan a counterattack, then kicked straight into the orange-haired one's stomach, making him vomit a mouthful of blood. Even so, he himself did not understand why his attack was effective. The orange-haired one changed back to female form. Channeling energy in her palm, she unleashed a long-range palm strike. Gabimaru coughed up blood and collapsed to the ground. Before he could recover from the shock, the opponent had unleashed a series of punches from a considerable distance. Gabimaru could only raise his hands to block, taking countless damage. This feeling was exactly the same as when Mai punched him in the forest. Although he knew defending was meaningless, he could not do anything else. Just as he was about to give up, the image of his beloved wife appeared before his eyes. Gabimaru would not allow himself to fall at this moment. The desire to reunite with his wife as a boost gave him more strength. Our protagonist rushed in to trade blows with the enemy. Gabimaru must return. Even if his face is torn apart, he must return to save his wife. The more he thought, the speed of Gabimaru's attacks increased exponentially. If she has the ability to regenerate, he will tear her to pieces faster than her recovery speed. So after 1001 punches at the speed of light, Gabimaru had turned the orange-haired one's body into a honeycomb, forced her to reveal the location of the elixir of life. At this point, the orange-haired one had to use her trump card. Countless flowers bloomed on her body. Gradually, they covered her body and formed a giant flower, looking extremely grotesque. Gabimaru calmed himself down. This was not the first time he had fought a monster. He just needed to analyze the opponent and counterattack accurately. However, in this form, her power was absolute. The electric current released plowed the ground, making it shake. Violently, Gabimaru got up from the rubble, out of breath but still lunged to attack. However, he could not get through her tentacles and was electrocuted badly. Gabimaru intended to use fire art to burn her again. Unfortunately, his body had reached its limit. Just moving was excruciatingly painful. That monster continued to give him an enthusiastic massage. Gabimaru was in so much pain he did not know if this was a dream or reality. He woke up to see his wife sitting next to him. He looked around bewildered and thought it was just a nightmare. Yet his tears kept falling. While his wife went to make tea, Gabimaru looked around the familiar house and quickly realized the harsh truth. He could only apologize to his wife because he could not come back anymore. The monster tightened its grip on Gabimaru's body. Blood sprayed everywhere, but it was not his. The 20th iron rule of ninjas: if faced with your end, you must use all remaining strength to inflict as much damage as possible on the enemy. Before perishing, Gabimaru directly used fire art on himself, wanting to take the great celestial being down with him, but in the end only managed to burn 2 of its tentacles. Now Gabimaru had no strength left. He was about to say sorry to his wife before his end. Mai suddenly appeared next to him. The little girl created a protective dome for both of them, then slid down the cliff and fell into the deep abyss. The orange-haired one quickly recovered to her original state, wondering what Mai was doing here. In another development, Senta bowed his head and apologized for letting Gabimaru escape. Actually, last night he tried to find him, but the deeper he went, the thicker the fog became, making it impossible to see. Hoko explained, "It is difficult for ordinary people to pass through that fog." Sajiri guessed Gabimaru was heading for Horai, so she immediately demanded to go find him. Yuzuri objected, not wanting to venture into danger. And besides, executioners do not care about the life or end of convicts. Why should Sagiri care so much about Gabimaru, who knew Hoko wanted to go to Horai because Mai was missing? He could also lead them all through the fog safely. Hearing this, Yuzuriha did a 180-degree turn, holding Sajiri's hand, saying she was very worried about Gabimaru. On the way, she bossily asked about the great celestial beings. So the wooden man told her that the great celestial beings are 7 hermits, and they were currently sitting leisurely in Horai, discussing whether they prefer men or women. While they were enthusiastically discussing, the purple-haired one appeared and announced, "Recently some rather strong humans have appeared on the island and have ended the lives of quite a few Ryujin." The golden-haired one immediately blamed it on Jufa for not guarding carefully, from missing 2 guys on the beach to struggling with another one outside the gate last night, saying that he flicked a teacup at Jufa's head, then criticized him for letting an ordinary human force him to change to his demon form to fight after using too much tan in the battle with Gabimaru. Last night his body had become unbelievably old and withered. Jufa was quickly reminded by the purple-haired leader that everyone here is a family. They are not allowed to harm each other. Moreover, he is the only one allowed to physically affect Jufa. Jufa then reported that he had beaten the brothers, Job half to their end, and thrown them into a pit. They must have all bloomed into flowers by now. The purple-haired one suggested Jufa not underestimate them. The remains of a gatekeeper god were just discovered in a beheaded state. Anyone capable of ending their lives is not an ordinary person. These two and the one who pushed Jufa to the brink last night are very different. Tight v kai Lai I luben da chofun tip theo katep cert. Tuiskesta tiptike tu the nyim im ttse quitates easy sithit lapia. Sure enough, Chob carried his brother and leaped from the pit. His confidence clearly boosted many times over. The purple-haired one turned and asked if Jufa had eliminated the one who forced him to transform. Seeing him nod slightly, the purple-haired one began pouring some liquid into a cup. After drinking it, Jufa became young again, but his expression looked very bitter. The wooden man on the other side was gently explaining, previously a great celestial being reached enlightenment and became a saint, then split into 7 parts, which are the 7 Tensen of today. All of them look identical, but their personalities and roles are different. However, that is just a legend from when the wooden man was young. Hearing this, Yuzuriha guessed that back then Hoko was a leaf. Turns out he and the others living on the island all used to look human. The villages were quite prosperous until 1,000 years ago. The people lived longer, but their bodies gradually turned into trees. Before losing consciousness, they all gathered here so their souls could be invited to Horai. After their passing, Hoko's family was also transformed. Sadly, his daughter was the first, while he was the last one remaining. Horai is the final resting place for souls. The great celestial beings are the gods who choose who enters. Anyone who challenges their power will receive a final sentence. At this moment, Sajiri only wished for one thing, that Gabimaru was okay, and the truth proved that he was indeed okay. After being saved by Mai and falling into the abyss, Gabimaru came to a conclusion: those great celestial beings are just monsters. Nothing more, nothing less. So he can come up with a plan to fight against them. Just as he needed more people for this, Tamiya and Fuchi appeared right behind him. The moment Tamiya saw Gabimaru, he let out a taunt, saying he looked as tattered as a ragged cloth, but the vision of being pierced through the stomach by Gabimaru flashed before his eyes. However, in his current state, Tamiya warned Gabimaru not to act rashly if he did not want to perish. He himself knew it was difficult to defeat the dragon sword without sustaining injuries. From Tamiya's stance, he deduced that his left side had no strength. This meant that his left hand was seriously injured. At this point, both sides knew the result of the bloody battle would be the end of them both. Fuchi quickly stepped forward, telling them not to waste time on meaningless things. Tamiya had the opposite thought. all battles begin by assessing the opponent's preliminary movements. But Fuchi insisted that showing off strength was unnecessary. What they should do now is gather information from Gabimaru. He had a way to achieve that without any fighting. So he drew his sword and asked Gabimaru if he was confident in defeating the two of them, not knowing he himself was in a weak position. Gabimaru immediately changed his tactics, bowing down and asking them to cooperate with him. Hearing this, Tamiya immediately drew his sword and slashed down, quick as a flash, yet Gabimaru sat there without flinching. It seems this kid had no intention of deceiving him. However, that disappointed Tamiya. He needed strong warriors, not cowards who easily bow before their enemies. Fuchi criticized Tamiya's thinking as too short-sighted. He wanted to know the real reason. Gabimaru accepted bowing without hesitation after hearing him recount the battle with one of the great celestial beings. Tamiya and Fuchi's jaws dropped in surprise, while the dragon sword wondered why he could not meet a worthy opponent. Fuchi was more interested in their extraordinary regenerative abilities. Of course, Gabimaru was also completely in the dark. He just wanted to get the pardon to return to one person, and he would do anything to achieve that. While Fuchi was skeptical and needed more proof that what Gabimaru said was true, Tamiya agreed immediately because he did not care about the pardon but wanted to become immortal. Fuchi thought he would drink the elixir himself until he laughed and said that method was too boring. What Tamiya aims for is for his name to resound throughout the country and become a legend. His image will be recorded in history for generations to come. Fuchi thought it was an utterly absurd goal, but no one taxes dreams, so Tamiya just dreamed on. Actually, he did not care about Tamiya's distant dream, but he was very interested in those immortal creatures. Without a second thought, he was ready to dissect them as soon as Tamiya took them down. And so a three-person alliance was formed with different purposes. The first thing Fuchi wanted to know was who this pink-haired girl is. Gabimaru could not hide his surprise when Mei suddenly grew up. Since when and now the girl can even talk? Gabimaru immediately rushed over, telling Mei to provide him with information about the elixir, then had to apologize to her for being too aggressive and at the same time thanked Mei for saving his life. Gabimaru wanted to know if her power was the same as the great celestial beings, but the little girl said nothing. On the other hand, Senta, after connecting the facts he had with the story that Hoko told, came to a conclusion. This place is not Shinsenkyo, but clearly a religious system created by humans. Terms like Horai or the names of the great celestial beings are all terms used by different religions. All the mixed elements come from old interpretations of culture. They are crudely mixed, while specific eras and cultures are superficially connected. Finally, all evidence leads to the name Mojomajiza, the founder of a new religion with a plot to overthrow the shogunate. Religion he founded is quite similar to this place because they are patched together from different religions. That is why before, Senta always felt this place was quite flawed, not just in faith, but also in the monsters and the structure of the island. He believes someone created this island, and even that someone has returned without being mutated. In conclusion, they can find the elixir and return home. After a long ramble, Senta suddenly realized he had said a bit too much, but Sajiri greatly appreciated his abilities. Except for guarding, Senta is actually very reliable. While Yuzuriya pointed out an important issue. If what Senta says is true, this twisted ideal has lasted for 1,000 years. Can they possibly defeat them? And the fate of Gabimaru and Mei is still unknown. Sajiri was sure he was still alive. Maybe right now he is making a plan and executing it to reunite with the one he loves. Sure enough, our protagonist is persuading Mei to reveal the secret of the great celestial beings and how to defeat them. Since Mei's current language is not yet complete, she can only summarize it with one word, Tao, followed by a few other words with extremely confusing gestures. Gabimaru did not understand what Mei was trying to convey. Fuchi, hearing the word Tao, said it is the chakras in Chinese medicine. At the same time, Hoko was explaining to the others. Tao is the power that flows through all things. Everything in this world is created by the flow of Tao. Unlocking the Tao means touching the origin of the universe. Yuzuriha heard the explanation but did not get it. If only there was a handsome teacher here, perhaps she would have understood 80 to 90% of it. In another development, Nurugai was hiding behind a tree, then rushed to attack Shion from behind, yet he still took her weapon without even turning around. Shion told Nurugai to do whatever she wanted, but he still maintained his stance of not teaching her the sword. Nurugai earnestly begged the master teach her to avenge Tenza. However, Shion did not want to see any more children perish before his eyes, so he refused to teach swordsmanship to Nurugai, and also refused her 2 words master. Nurugai cried and clung to Shien's clothes, and said she could not bear to see the people she loved pass away one by one, so she only hoped Shien would accept her as a disciple. Shien explained this is not something learned in a day or 2. Everything in the world has its own wavelength. That is why Shien, though blind, can still know the height, weight and even the high bun of Nurugai. Using wavelengths not only improves the senses, but also increases a person's physical abilities. Shien taught Nurugai to arrange her thoughts to feel them, not too intense nor too quiet. This is also the Tao that Mei and Hoko mentioned. Each person has a different explanation, but they all lead to one thing. Shien showed Nurugai she must achieve a state of balance between rage and peace. Only then can she easily detect the waves. This state of mind allows a person to surpass their normal abilities, but this is not a skill easily acquired. Nurugai even holds her sword incorrectly, so the day she becomes proficient is still far away. So Shien taught her the correct way to hold it. Right at this moment, a large monster appeared right behind Shien. Shien slightly dodged and cut off its arm and head. The speed of the sword is also something Nurugai needs to pay attention to. If you cut into the fatty part, the blade will be sharper. Saying that he immediately demonstrated for her what a master swordsman is like. Nurugai immediately drew her sword and followed suit before her master changed his mind. Although Shien can defeat the Dashi, he has no chance of winning against the great celestial beings. He still needs to hone his skills further, but on this island there is no such luxury. At this time on Gabimaru's side, many Dashi also arrived. Tamiya immediately rushed up and wiped out the first wave with one move. The fastest way to understand Tao is to practice it. Luckily there are many monsters for him to practice on. Saying that, Tamiya lifted Mei onto his shoulders for the little girl to teach him the power of Tao. Meanwhile, Gabimaru discovered someone completely different from the Dashi hiding in the fog. Contrary to the chaotic scene outside, 2 great celestial beings are happily practicing their alphabet together because they are about to get more tan from the 2 brothers. Chobe was thrown into the pit. They were confident no one could escape that pit, but Chobe is using all his strength to carry his little brother and climb up. Chobe swore to eliminate them at all costs. Seeing his older brother so determined, Toma had to go along and prepare to plan an attack. Chobe defiantly said he did not need a plan because he had discovered the weakness of the great celestial beings lies in the lower body. When he cut the golden-haired guy's body in half, his body began to regenerate from the bottom up, not from the heart or head. They are like plants, so you need to attack the roots, not the top. After saying that, Chobe casually broke off a gray arm from the pit and ate it. Just then someone with a grotesque face appeared. The 2 brothers immediately backed away, while the opponent introduced himself as coming here to inspect under the orders of the great celestial beings. Other Taoists had also gone to the places with people, specifically the one observing Gabimaru's group. Unlike the Dashi, who have many flaws and are not allowed in Horai, the Taoists directly serve the great celestial beings and are their right-hand men. This guy requested the 2 brothers to return to the pit to complete the elixir refinement process before he could finish his sentence. Chobe rushed to attack. He angrily punched Chobe's face askew, but he had grabbed his hand and broke it in a heartbeat. The Taoist did not expect a mortal could absorb Tao if it could not be resolved peacefully. He was ready to eliminate them both. Chobe told Toma to handle the Dashi so he could focus on his specialty, and so after just a few flashes of the sword, they were all dealt with quickly. The Taoist was not the least bit afraid, because thanks to the flow of Tao, he knew Chobe was gradually getting exhausted. Chobe furiously rushed to attack like a storm, but without using Tao it was useless, because the Taoist could regenerate his body in an instant. After letting Chobe fight until he was exhausted, he unleashed a blow that flattened him to the ground. Toma, seeing his brother fall, rushed to his side, but was stopped by the Dashi. The Taoist was preparing to grab Chobe's head and throw him into the pit. Who knew Chobe was just waiting for this opportunity to tear his face open, surprising even his younger brother. Chobe requested Toma to go back and handle the Dashi, shocking the Taoist a second time as his throat had recovered. Perhaps being thrown into the elixir pit had caused Chobe's body to change unexpectedly, more so Chobe could now see the light from the Taoist's body, something ordinary people cannot detect. Seeing the opponent standing frozen, Chobe guessed he had hit a nerve. That light must be the key to ending the great celestial beings. At this moment Chobe's Tao suddenly surged. Realizing this guy was too dangerous, the Taoist was forced to eliminate him before things went further, and so Chobe was hit by 2 consecutive long-range strikes because he could not see the Tao clearly. Both his hands were then also broken from blocking a direct attack, but only a few seconds later they had returned to their original state, even landing a punch on the Taoist. Chobe's constantly increasing Tao made him fearful. This power had surpassed the limits of a human. Toma knew his brother was a master of adaptation, but this dizzying speed also overwhelmed him. Actually, Chobe himself did not know what had happened. He just felt his body was as high as if on something. Chobe was not afraid of being transformed into a monster, because nothing in this world lasts forever, except for one thing. Remembering the day the 2 brothers were dragged to the robber's den, seeing they were handsome and bright, they intended to cut a few lines on their faces to satisfy their animalistic pleasure. Toma was chosen to be first on the chopping block, but Chobe actively took the knife and cut his own face in his brother's place, making even the robbers hesitate. That is enough reminiscing about the old days. Now Chobe was overcoming all attacks and rushing towards the Taoist, landing a punch in his navel making him cough up blood. Sure enough, his judgment was spot on. Faced with Chobe's ever-increasing power, the Taoist could only ambush from afar, but unlucky for him Chobe saw through it and dodged beautifully. Chobe could now see the Tao wrapped around his opponent's body. The Taoist hearing this panicked and called his 500 Dashi brothers to back him up. However, Toma had already wiped them out a while ago. As demoralized as the Taoist was, Chobe was just as excited. He challenged him to show more and stomped his hand under his foot. Seeing how the opponent gathered his power, Chobe immediately practiced it to get it hot. From the very first blow, he had punched a hole in the Taoist's body. The unrecoverable wound made him scream in pain. In contrast to Chobe's triumphant look, currently he could even see the Taoists, and through the Tao, Chobe slammed down on the already bleeding wound one more time, putting an end to his opponent. Meanwhile, Toma, behind, was silent, observing the scars on his brother's body. They were getting bigger and bigger, making him worry. Just then Chobe spun around and asked what was wrong with his brother. With his face momentarily distorted, Toma wondered if he was seeing things. He was glad his brother was alive, but those cucumber-like scars were too suspicious. Coincidentally and surprisingly, Mai's scar also had similar marks, except for one thing: she did not have to fight at all, but just sat on Tamiya's shoulders, teaching him to use Tao. However, the little girl could only say a few words, so Tamiya did not understand, had to slash in one way after another to test, but still had not succeeded. Seeing Gabimaru on the other side continuously feeding the monsters a beating, Tamiya immediately asked Mai if that was right. However, the Hollow One also received a similar comment to him. Meanwhile, Fuchi was enthusiastically examining the monsters' remains, because their internal structures were not the same. Although their exteriors were quite similar, inside one was like a fish, while the other was like a human. Thanks to that, he concluded, each monster has a different weakness, and the pink-haired girl over there is also an unknown. Gabimaru remembered when he almost perished, Mai had used a mysterious power to carve out the cliff and escape. An ordinary person could not do that. Being stared at by him, Mai cried out in fear. Seeing this, Tamiya immediately scolded Gabimaru not to glare at a girl like that, but he did not care because he already had a wife. Tamiya explained he did not mean it that way. It is just that now Gabimaru is his disciple, so it is strictly forbidden to make a woman cry. Gabimaru kicked off a monster's head and asserted, he is no one's disciple. Fuchi, hearing the argument between the two, suddenly felt the Hollow One was more human than rumor had it. Just then, the Taoist, who had been motionless all this time, saw Mai. He immediately rushed to ambush Tamiya, then used his cloak to snatch Mai towards him. The Taoist respectfully knelt on the ground, saying he had been looking for Mai for a long time. It had been many centuries since she was exiled from the palace and disappeared from Horai, making the 500 Taoist brothers feel extremely disappointed, although Rian forbade them from looking for Mai. Luckily today he found her here, so he wanted her to return with him. Then the Taoist told Gabimaru's group that Mai looks human, but eats flesh like the celestial beings. Gabimaru knew Mai was not human, but did not expect the little girl to have such a special status. Seeing the Taoist begging Mai to return to Horai and lead them, Gabimaru hesitated, not knowing what to do with Mai. But as soon as he saw the little girl's teary eyes, he did not hesitate to jump in front of Mai, surprising both his comrades and his opponent. Even he himself was surprised by his impulsive action. Although he did not know the full story, Gabimaru did not want Mai to cry ever again. The Taoist called Gabimaru too troublesome, and called more comrades to turn them all into tan. Immediately after, centipedes and butterflies also swarmed here, because they are the masters of these insects. While Gabimaru carefully planned his approach to them, Tamiya had already gone ahead and slashed the centipedes. He thanked them for taking his left arm. So now his sword skills were even stronger than before. While he was talking enthusiastically, the Taoist shot a palm strike at his face. Tamiya Gabimaru immediately realized this was an invisible attack, so he warned Tamiya not to act recklessly. At that moment, the centipede user rushed to attack Gabimaru, while Tamiya fought fiercely with the one controlling the butterflies. As a result, due to the close distance, Gabimaru accidentally punched Tamiya. The Taoist scornfully said they were not his opponents and had nothing to do with Mei. Why waste effort protecting her? Gabimaru admitted he was right. However, since setting foot on this island, he had become a different person. And what is wrong with repaying someone who saved you? Gabimaru just wondered why the Taoists were so obsessed with Mei. They did not hide it and replied that they study Tao, and Mei is an important link. In that process, there are 5 steps to mastering Tao: guiding Tao, embryonic breathing, celestial circulation, and finally and most importantly, the art of the bedchamber. The art of the bedchamber requires a partner because it involves the circulation between yin and yang. Tamiya did not understand, so Fuchi explained it to him. This is jewel cultivation. He understood. Tamiya could only exclaim, "This is too ridiculous," but the Taoists considered this a noble form of cultivation. All things have yin or yang energy. A person must develop their Tao to the point where both circulate. The great celestial beings are the ones who developed this technique and have practiced it for thousands of years. Thanks to the flexible circulation of yin and yang, the great celestial beings have the ability to change gender. Meanwhile, ordinary creatures only possess one gender. Therefore, the Taoists need a partner to circulate yin and yang just right. The quality of Mei's yin energy is the highest. Although Mei shares the same origin as the great celestial beings, she only possesses yin energy and was thus exiled from the palace. Ryan gave her 2 choices. One is to perish like a stray dog. 2 is to stay in Horai as a training partner for the Taoists. The scars on Mei's body are proof of that. Unfortunately, she ran away soon after, so they could not cultivate. The more Tamiya heard, the more offended he felt. Gabimaru next to him was also glaring daggers at the 2 Taoists. Mei's situation was not much different from his wife's. He could not accept them being treated like objects. The 2 Taoists knew they could not turn their opponents into tan, so they immediately merged with the centipedes and butterflies to wipe them all out. Tamiya jumped up and slashed one of their wings to pieces. The butterflies swarmed in, but he dodged them. However, due to inhaling the poisonous gas, he collapsed to the ground. At the same time, Gabimaru used fire art to burn the centipede user's arm. He quickly activated the immortal art spirit finger. Certainly. Here is the next part of your cert file translation. I will continue to adhere to all the established guidelines for tone, accuracy, and formatting, shooting Tao towards Gabimaru, forcing him to jump back to dodge the blow. The swarm of butterflies was just waiting for that to fly in and attack, but Gabimaru had already used the fireball ninjutsu, creating a wall of fire to block their path. The centipede head stopped its comrade from continuing the attack, fearing they would hit Mei. Gabimaru took this opportunity to observe their power. He could vaguely sense the Tao, but that was not enough to defeat the enemy. Just then Fuchi explained it to him. The mind must be calm to see the Tao. To confirm, he asked Mei to help him feel the Tao by letting her touch him. Gabimaru also felt something when Mei held his hand. Fuchi advised him to weaken his mind. But in the middle of a battle like this, it is too difficult to do so. Suddenly Mei said, "Your weakness is the seed of strength." Combined with Sajiri's words, Gabimaru could now clearly see the flow of Tao. Therefore, when he returned to the battle, all of the enemy's attacks could not reach him. This time Gabimaru did not rush his attacks anymore, but calmly predicted the enemy's intentions and attack direction through the Tao. He himself could also feel everything around him. By accepting his own weakness, he understood how Sajiri moved forward while being shaken. Seeing the centipede monster's attack, Gabimaru only needed one hand to strip off the outer centipede armor and take him down. Even the butterfly head that tried to sneak attack shared the same fate. At this point he had to confess the truth. 3 Taoists were asked to monitor the humans, because the great celestial beings sensed the people who came to the island. This time were on a different level. He wanted to say he gave up but was secretly forming a seal behind his back to control the centipedes. Gabimaru immediately jumped over Tamiya's head, kicking fire at them, then kicked them straight at the butterfly head. At the same time, Tamiya split the centipede head in two down here. In another development, Hoko had led the group to Horai and had his head broken by Muden with just a wave of his hand. He was very surprised, because this was the first time in 1,000 years anyone had gotten this far. Yuzuriha felt she could not match the opponent, and immediately turned and ran for her life, but unfortunately she was caught in half a beat. Sajiri's face darkened knowing Muden outclassed them all. However, she still drew her sword demanding he release Yuzuriha. Hoko, despite having his head cut off, was still alive and said that was a great celestial being. Muden chuckled, saying that was not enough to end Hoko, but it would speed up the transformation process and turn him into a tree. Hoko accepted this fate, only hoping his soul would be invited into Horai, who knew Muden would bluntly reveal all the things about souls and religion were just a hoax, made up by the master to maintain order on the island. This island was originally a place for experiments on life. Hoko and all the others were just a part of the experiment, and those who came to the island were research materials. For example, these kiyoshi were created by Muden from those who came to the island to explore for easy play. Meanwhile, those with noble constitutions would be turned into tan, or the elixir of life that people often talk about. However, they only work on the great celestial beings. If ordinary people absorb them, they will turn into trees. The proof is the people in Hoko's village can live forever, but do not have the youth they always wished for. Until now, the great celestial beings are still researching how to fix this, but have not yet found a favorable result. Hearing this, Sajiri thought of Gabimaru. No elixir meant no pardon. Meanwhile, Muden announced their journey had come to an end. Now just obediently follow him, and it will be fine. As soon as the words left his mouth, Yuzuriha next to him had disappeared. Before he could be surprised, Muden was hit by her kunai, coughing up blood, and had his head cut off. Yuzuriha thought she had escaped Muden, and immediately ran to tell Sajiri to get out of there, but she was still frozen in place. Yuzuriha had to remind Sajiri the top priority is to survive. However, just as they were about to flee, Muden had regrown his head, ordered the kiyoshi to chase after Yuzuriha, then made them explode to hold her back, but she managed to dodge in time. It turns out Yuzuriha could also see and use Tao. The only difference is that in her village people call it ki. Muden thought she had not grasped the full use of Tao, so he intended to teach her again. Senta suddenly stepped out and said if you want to end her life, he would have to get past his remains first. Muden admitted Senta and Sajiri also had some talent, but he had already chosen Yuzuriha, and even wanted to dual cultivate with her if she was talented enough. Sajiri did not expect Senta to draw his sword for a criminal. While wondering if this guy had feelings for Yuzuriha, Muden suddenly struck and sent her flying. He explained, this move is done by gathering and releasing Tao. However, Yuzuriha did not need to learn this move. Let me show you some much better moves. As soon as the words left his mouth, Muden's 4 limbs were cut off by Senta, but Yuzuriha did not need his help, because she had decided to go all out with her trump card. After drinking something, Yuzuriha's entire body secreted a slimy substance, then combined with the sticky ninjutsu, allowing her to transform the liquids she just secreted into solids to attack. Next was a series of ninjutsu that cut Muden in half, yet he still easily regenerated his body, and commented that she should improve her abilities. Senta cut off Muden's eye, requesting Yuzuriha to combine with him to defeat this monster. And so the two continuously launched attacks at the opponent. They did not hit Muden and even got in each other's way. Finally, Yuzuriha was grabbed by the leg and slammed into Senta. After observing how she used Tao, Muden lost interest and concluded she was not suitable for him. Even so, he still opened his arms wide to welcome them to Horai, the land of the inviolable gods. At this time, Sajiri struggled to get up and asked the wooden man about the weakness of the great celestial beings. Hoko at this time still considered Muden a god and accepted divine punishment. Sajiri understood his feelings, but if this continued, they would all be eliminated. Hoko also could not see Mei again. Sure enough, as soon as he heard this name, his eyes changed. As soon as she grasped their weakness, Sajiri immediately joined the battle despite being openly looked down upon by the opponent. Even so, she still resolutely charged forward while throwing her sword into Muden's stomach, then rotated the blade to cut through the dantian and past the navel. Legend says that Tao is born from the dantian, passes through the body and returns again. If that place could be injured, then Muden could be ended. However, Sajiri did not have enough Tao to do that. No matter where she cut, Muden could regenerate. He believed that none of the three here had the ability to end his life. Suddenly Sajiri's Tao skyrocketed, then launched a slash towards Mudan. Thanks to his quick reflexes, he dodged the fatal blow. However, the wound on his face would not stop bleeding. This meant that this wound could not be regenerated. Actually, Sajiri had seen a halo when she got close to Mudan. If that was Ta, then she knew how to cut because she had seen Gabimaru have a similar halo before. Even Rokuroda, the giant of Bison, had it. After the recent attack, Mudan's attention had shifted to Sagiri. He was eager to turn her into a useful type of Tan. Therefore, Mudan used the earthly yin night walk technique and vanished in an instant. Sagiri almost perished, if not for Yuzuriha intervening in time to stop him. He explained Mudan did not disappear, but just shrunk his Tao so they could not detect him. This move is quite similar to her substitution jutsu, so she could rid him. Sajiri calmly stabilized her mind to strike down, but Mudan had acted faster. He ordered the Kiyoshi to end Yuzuriha, but Senta had beautifully dealt with them. The situation was not very good, forcing Mudan to bite off his own arm to escape. At the same time, he shot a palm strike towards Yuzuriha. She immediately jumped over Senta's head for him to take the full blow in her place. Sajiri also continuously unleashed lightning-fast slashes, maintaining her breath while attacking, gradually wore down her strength. But thanks to the smooth coordination between the three, Mudan was now just a torso lying on the ground. They thought the game was over. Unexpectedly, he suddenly flew up high, controlling the Tao in the atmosphere. After changing his body to female, Mudan rained down thousands of Tao beams, making the ground shake violently. The three of them quickly ran away like ducks. Senta was unlucky to be hit by one blow and fell flat on his face, while Sajiri's nose was bleeding profusely and her vision was blurring. Just as she was about to give up, Yuzuriha spoke up, encouraging her not to give up yet. She believed this was a sign the enemy was worried. Moon had to dodge all of Sajiri's attacks, because her Tao was his nemesis, not to mention he was just a monster, not some god. So there must be a way to end his life. Yuzuriha downed another vial of liquid, then used her slime to catch Mudan's leg. She was willing to endure a series of Tao beams just to pull him down to the ground, making it easier for her comrades to act. Senta stabbed him from behind with a sword, while using his own life to hold Mudan, waiting for Sajiri to rush forward and cut through his stomach. Finally, after the efforts of all three, Mudan lay motionless in a pool of blood. Just fighting one was this difficult, and there were 6 more like him. Their power was far beyond human comprehension, and more than what Hoko had described. However, the biggest problem now was that the elixir did not exist. Seeing Sajiri worried, Yuzuriha immediately suggested bringing back the gold here to compensate for the lack of elixir. While she was happy with the pile of gold, Sajiri quietly asked Senta if he had feelings for her. Hearing that, he jumped and denied it. Actually, he was just jealous of her freedom. When he was young, Senta wanted to be an artist, but was forced by his parents to follow the family business. While he did not like them, the Yamada, or being a sword tester, Senta hated taking lives, so he spent a lot of time rationalizing it. This is why he is knowledgeable about many different religions. Even more ironically, because of that diligence, Senta's rank gradually increased. Finally, he gave up his dream and began to fulfill his responsibilities, until Yuzuriha saw through his heart. Time and time again, Senta felt confused by her similar personality traits, and sometimes her extreme cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness. Senta was both jealous and admired that freedom, even though he knew it was taboo for an executioner to admire a criminal. After hearing this, Sajiri felt great empathy for Senta because she had a similar feeling for Gabimaru. At the same time, on the Hollow One's side, he was asking Mei why she followed him, then thanked her for saving his life twice. Fucha, seeing this scene, suddenly remembered Sajiri's comment about Gabimaru. He is not as heartless as his nickname. His true self is only clearly revealed when referring to a specific person, witnessing firsthand. This soft side made Fucha curious, wondering if it affected his work much or not. Just then, Gabimaru suddenly had a nosebleed and fainted. Meanwhile, Yuzuriha discovered many flowers growing where Mudan had perished. Suddenly a flower rushed to attack her, but Senta used his body to shield her. The lives he had once taken suddenly flashed before his eyes, but Yuzuriha appeared and shattered them all. Her presence breathed new life into Senta's gloomy existence. He did not need much but just wanted to watch her from afar. At this time, Senta's body was gradually blooming with flowers, while Mudan had switched to his demon combat form with both genders. Just as he was about to attack the 2 girls with hundreds of flowers, Shion appeared in time and cut them all down. He calmly told Nurugai to cut the flowers and roots on Senta's body to slow down the blooming process, then led everyone away from there. Based on the movement, smell, and sound of the waves, Shion realized this was the one who ended Tenza's life, his poor disciple. On his way here, Shion had experimented on different monsters to test the use and nature of the waves, also known as Tao. Now he would prove to Mudan that even immortals can perish. Sure enough, as soon as the enemy launched an attack, Shion just lightly drew his sword and had already cut them into 100 pieces. On the other hand, the flowers had stopped growing on Senta's body, but right now he was losing too much blood. Yuzuriha took out a vial of styptic medicine, but Senta refused to use it. Sajiri was worried about the chubby guy. Nurugai reassured her to stay calm because her master was very strong. The little girl believed her master could not lose his life here. Just as Nurugai said, Shion was fighting on par with Mudan, with countless deadly blows, forcing him to resort to a rain of bullets, of Tao shattering the entrance to Horai. In the thick dust and smoke, a sword flew out and pierced through Mudan's stomach. Immediately after, Shion appeared and added another blow, making him fall. Yuzuriha, seeing this, could not help but be dumbfounded. Nurugai proudly said her master of course had to be strong. As for Sajiri, she particularly noticed that Mudan could not regenerate. Shion's Tao was really effective on him. Although his test was effective, countless roses suddenly grew on his body. It turns out Mudan had cunningly taken advantage of the small scratches to sow flower seeds there in order to turn Shion into Tan, who knew he would cut off all their roots. Blood soaked his clothes, but it did not make him falter or lose heart. However, losing too much blood made Shion worry he could hardly hold on until he sent this monster to its grave. Seeing this, Sajiri immediately wanted to go help him, while Yuzuriha chose to stay. Suddenly Nurugai came and hugged her, then turned back to hug. Sajiri actually doing so made her feel a bit more energetic. Vitality. The story is that Nurugai used to do that with her grandfather. Recently she also tried to do it with her master and received the exact same feedback. Shion did not understand how Nurugai did this, but he asked the little girl to stop hugging him so tightly. Instead, just a light touch was enough for him to feel it. After hearing this, Sajiri came to the conclusion that there are positive interactions that help increase others' Tao, but then she immediately dismissed that thought. There was no more time to think now. As long as she could still move, she had to fight. Sajiri said the monster's weakness was in its Danshin. They had to attack its core to have a chance of winning. The problem is Muda now had 2 Danshins. Moreover, getting scratched by it once would mean the end. Therefore, Sajiri and Nurugai wrapped themselves in bandages and Yuzuriha's mucus to both prevent scratches and prevent pollen from entering their bodies. Sajiri and Nurugai would be the bait and attack from the front, creating an opportunity for Shion to get close and cut off Mudan's Danshin. While they were discussing, he suddenly approached and ambushed Nurugai. Luckily, the little girl managed to dodge in time thanks to her agility. However, Mudan's speed was also not to be underestimated. As soon as he slipped behind Nurugai, Sajiri immediately rushed to block the blow and save the girl. Her sword stroke was so fast and steady that it made Shion surprised. He could feel Sajiri was predicting Mudan's movements based on Tao, even faster and more accurately than himself. Shion was very pleased and began to execute her plan. He ran while cutting off Mudan's flower stamens, immediately raining down a shower of lasers, but could not touch a single hair on Shion's leg. On top of that, the 2 girls behind him cut off the remaining flower stamens. Shion was just waiting for that to rush towards Mudan, using all his strength to cut off his leg, then immediately cut off the other one. Finally, Mudan was felled with a thud. His body's regeneration speed was also slowing down. Even so, Sajiri was now vomiting blood. Shion's condition on the other side was even worse than hers. Mudan happily rained down lasers again, while Sajiri hugged Nurugai and ran for her life. Shion continued to advance because the hatred was rising higher and higher in him. Shion could not forgive himself for abandoning Tenza at that time, so even if he had to perish here, he had to take this monster with him. Shion's Tao surged like a storm. Mudan intended to swat him away with his hand but was pinned to the ground by the 2 girls. At the very moment of the decisive blow, Shion hesitated to strike down because he could not feel a strong wave source coming from here. Just then Senta shouted loudly, "The weakness! Its real weakness is in the oval, because if the great celestial being is a type of plant, then the oval is its Danshin." Shion followed Senta's words and immediately unleashed an unstoppable slash. The fatal blow had completely destroyed Mudan. Before vanishing into thin air, Muden revealed a face that could not be happier, because he had waited for this moment for 1,000 years, and now it had become a reality. Muden perished, leaving behind hundreds of blooming flowers before the gate of Horai. However, the serious problem now is, Sento and Sheen are near their end from blood loss. While Yuzuriha only has one more dose of medicine left, she thinks Sheen should be the one to use that dose, because Sento is very weak now. Even though he was facing his end, he felt no fear. On the contrary, he felt happy to pass on in the arms of the person he had always admired. That night, Sajiri stood silently before Senta's grave. She thanked Yuzuriha for helping her understand many things. Whether they are executioners or criminals does not matter anymore. Now they just need to strive to return alive. On the other hand, Gabimaru had just woken up from his delirium. He cautiously looked around and asked where this was. Fuchi replied they were all hiding in a cave halfway up the valley wall, but he had no memory of this. Meanwhile, Sajiri's group was advancing deep into Horai. Yuzuriha looted some clothes and was about to change. Seeing Nurugai wanted to wear them made Yuzuriha wonder why a boy would want to wear a dress. While they were fighting, Sheen advised Sajiri to relax a bit before settling the chaos over there. He began to piece together the information. First is the power source called Tao. If used proficiently, the user will achieve superhuman abilities, but using too much will deplete physical strength, not to mention the side effects of mental or physical changes, or it can even affect a person's consciousness or memories. In the worst case, overuse of Tao will lead to one's end. Mentioning life and end made Yuzuriha remember the elixir of life, which was just confirmed to be non-existent. However, Sajiri believed it existed, because Gabimaru once said his village chief was an immortal. Who knew Yuzuriha would say it was probably just an illusion. Shinobi often show someone a supernatural phenomenon when they are young. To easily control and manipulate that person, that memory will be deeply ingrained in the subconscious, and they cannot harm the one who cast it. Yuzuriha knew this, because her village also used a similar method, and the wife Gabimaru often mentioned is likely part of the illusion, because until now Sajiri had never heard him mention his wife's name, and Gabimaru at this moment was confused, not knowing how he got here. Are the people in front of him friends or foes? All he remembered was that he was the Hollow, the greatest ninja of Awagakur village. Gabimaru intended to secretly gather information while resting. If they found out, he would have to take action. Mai with a glance recognized that Gabimaru was now different from before. Meanwhile, Sajiri on the other side was sleepless from what she had just heard. Even Sheen's joke could not cheer her up. It was only the third night on the island, but almost all her comrades had perished. Not to mention Gabimaru was completely out of contact, making her unable to calm down. Sheen was surprised, thinking Sagiri had fallen in love, but she quickly dismissed it because this guy always associated things with romance. So frivolous actually. Sajiri had not determined what her feelings for Gabimaru were, but if what Yuzuriha said was true, then she could not help but feel sorry for him, a young man used and turned into a killing machine with a deceived belief. Even so, Sagiri believed that Gabimaru would not give up and would survive and return.